What was an adventurer? Adventurers took on missions from guild branches that existed in various countries and made a living by accepting jobs that offered reward. Their tasks ranged from slaying monsters to delivering materials, and everything in between. Some became famous as heroes by slaying vicious dragons that threatened the people, while others returned from the depths of dungeons with untold riches and treasures. In a world like that, there was no shortage of dream chasers. At the Adventurers Guild in the Boltana branch, the adventure of Ark and Lean was about to begin. While they waited in line, Lean suddenly became nervous as their turn for an appraisal drew near. Ark tried to reassure her that they were almost up and asked what was wrong. He grabbed her hand, and Lean smiled as she wondered whether he was nervous as well. She wondered what kind of abilities she might have. Ark stared at her, stunned. When Lean noticed his reaction, she became concerned that something was wrong. Slightly embarrassed, Ark reassured her that, if she was Lean, everything was sure to be fine. Ark recalled his memories of her. Lean had been born and raised in the same village as him. They were childhood friends who had longed for the same adventure tale and had set off on a journey from the village together. He had to admit that she had really become beautiful. After becoming adventurers, he planned to save a decent amount of money, buy a ring, and confess his feelings. That was what he had been thinking all along. Their turn soon approached. Ark and Lean snapped their heads toward the announcement. Lean nervously watched as her moment arrived and wondered what they should do. Ark suddenly decided that Lean should go next. Lean gasped in confusion. Ark jokingly imagined the possibility of having an outrageous power and worried that she might feel small afterward. With smug confidence, he decided to give her a fleeting moment of glory. Lean could not understand what he was even talking about. Nevertheless, she stepped forward and decided to go first. After a while, the appraisal caused a sudden outburst of surprise. The woman conducting it announced that Lean's abilities were on a hero level. Her level cap was 80, and her skills were Sacred Magic, High Priestess, and Goddess's Blessing. Lean stood frozen in confusion. Someone in the crowd reacted in shock to the level cap of 80, recognizing it as an incredible height. The woman then wondered whether all of Lean's skills as a priestess were really that amazing, since they were usually only around 30. Another man became excited and reacted with disbelief that someone could possess 3 skills like those. Another person called it incredible and recognized Lean as truly a hero. The guild staff smiled and cheered for her, with all of them rooting for her future success. Lean nervously accepted their praise, then bowed in gratitude. Her face flushed with embarrassment as she hurriedly made her way back to Ark. Ark stood frozen in surprise. He proudly acknowledged how incredible she was, and Lean agreed, admitting that the result had been quite a surprise. Ark happily recognized that Lean was definitely cut out to be a priestess. Lean smiled and agreed that he was right before turning her thoughts toward Ark's own future. She considered that he would become a swordsman, or perhaps something more like a holy knight. Ark confidently accepted the idea and prepared for his turn. The announcement for the next appraisal suddenly came. Ark excitedly acknowledged it, while Lean cheerfully encouraged him to do his best. Ark brushed it off, certain that he did not have to try particularly hard. He approached the registration counter and requested adventurer registration, giving his name as Ark. The woman acknowledged his request and instructed him to place his hand on the crystal ball and wait. Ark realized that she understood what was happening now. Someone in the crowd recognized him as the boy who had been with the girl from earlier. Another person remarked on how young he was. Someone else wondered whether he might possess some insane skills, while another anticipated that the appraisal would be a spectacle. Ark silently prayed that everything would be decided there. At the very least, he hoped he would possess the ability to protect her. The woman waited silently for the result. Suddenly, her face flushed bright red as she struggled to suppress her laughter. Ark looked at her with confused eyes while she trembled, trying to keep herself from bursting into laughter. She finally apologized and assured him that there was no need to worry before revealing his abilities. His level cap was 1. The room fell completely silent. After a moment, the crowd burst into laughter. A man questioned the result in disbelief, asking whether the level was really 1. Someone else shouted that they had never heard of such a thing. Another person added that, on top of that, Ark possessed a spell of instant death called Success Unseen. Lean looked around the crowd with worry. Another voice condemned the result as something truly freakish, while someone else declared Ark the weakest magician in all of humanity. Lean called out to Ark, snapping him from his thoughts, and urged him to lower his head and accept the result. Ark turned toward her and agreed. In his mind, Ark realized that this was the skill he had been born with. He could not understand the meaning behind the level cap they had announced or what kind of absurdity it was. Lean and Ark stood silently in a corner while Lean watched him. Suddenly, a man approached and called out to Lean, asking for a small favor. Several other members stood behind him. Lean nervously asked who he was, and the man introduced himself as Alan, the leader of an S-rank party. Ark's eyes widened in surprise. Alan addressed Lean directly and, despite the suddenness of the request, asked her to join his party as a priestess. Lean stood in surprise, unable to process the offer. The crowd immediately reacted in shock upon recognizing Alan and his party. They were the group known for dealing with max-level monsters and were considered the real deal. It was also revealed that they had apparently been entrusted with a mission directly from the king. Someone in the crowd admired the fine lady accompanying Alan, while another person quickly told them to stop. Beads of sweat formed on Ark's face as the surrounding crowd erupted with excitement. The fact that Lean had been recruited into an S-rank party so soon after registering astonished everyone. Her talent was being praised despite her being a total rookie. Lean questioned why Alan wanted her, pointing out that she was only a level 1 newbie adventurer. Alan instructed the members of his party to wait for him outside while he finished speaking with Lean. Alan acknowledged that her questions were only natural and reassured her that there was no need to worry. If she joined his party, her level would skyrocket in no time. He and the others could not help but be amazed by her incredible talent. Ark clenched his fist as he wondered what an S-rank even was. Alan asked Lean to lend them her skills for the sake of the people. Ark immediately knew that the answer should have been a resounding no. Lean, however, silently fell into deep thought. Ark's eyes widened as he stared at her. He could not understand why she looked so troubled. All she had to do was say a single word and refuse. Ark suddenly recalled a memory from the past. Someone had called out to him, and he had turned toward the voice and acknowledged it. The person had asked whether he was really going to become an adventurer. Ark had smiled widely and declared his determination. Someday, his book would definitely be published. Lean had understood and told him that, when that time came, he should remember to. The memory was shattered by Lean's voice. Lean desperately asked Alan to invite her to join his party and begged him to accept her. Ark stood frozen in shock. Alan gratefully accepted her decision, calling it an absolutely brilliant choice. He grabbed Lean and immediately began preparing to take her to get her equipment. He intended to share with her the mindset of an adventurer and guide her along the way. Ark's hand trembled. He called Lean's name and tried to stop her, reaching out toward her. In a swift motion, Alan stopped Ark before he could grab her. He questioned who Ark was, leaving Ark staring at him in shock. Lean quietly acknowledged Ark. Ark stared at her with hopeful eyes and called her name. Alan smirked as he realized what was happening. He apologized to Ark, explaining that he had completely mistaken him for a thug. He then grabbed Ark's shoulder and questioned whether someone named Ark had been mentioned. He claimed to have a rough idea of the situation and considered it a real bummer, but in the world of adventurers, such things happened. According to Alan, it was a common occurrence. Ark tried to protest, unable to accept what was happening. Lean was supposed to travel with him. They had made a promise, and he could not understand whether she still wanted to travel together. Alan acknowledged that this sounded about right, but he still insisted that Lean was right to choose differently. He then asked Ark whether he had ever considered what his newfound ability truly meant. According to Alan, everything was predetermined from birth. In other words, abilities were powers bestowed upon people by the gods. Ark's eyes filled with mixed emotions. Alan continued by explaining that among the masses, a select few possessed extraordinary skills that allowed them to transcend the limits of ordinary mortals. They were the chosen ones, and such miracles could reach their full potential in an environment designed to maximize them. Alan then challenged Ark to consider whether he could handle that reality. Ark stood frozen at the door as Alan's words echoed through his mind. He wondered which of them the ability was meant for and what it meant for Lean. Nearby, a man wondered how long Ark intended to remain standing there. Another man replied that it was a real pity, especially considering the nature of Ark's skill. Ark clenched his teeth and resolved that it was not over yet. He opened the door and stormed outside, trying to convince himself that skills did not matter. Suddenly, a force slammed into him and sent him crashing to the ground. Someone exclaimed in surprise as Ark silently gasped in pain. His eyes widened when he saw a large, strongly built man towering over him. Ark stared up at him in shock. The man glared down at him and coldly ordered him to get out of the way, calling him trash. Fear filled Ark's eyes. A girl smirked at the situation, finding the man's treatment unnecessarily cold. Another woman cheerfully pointed out that they had only bumped into each other and questioned whether calling someone trash over such a small incident was really appropriate. She then turned her attention to Ark, who remained frozen in place, and wondered whether he truly thought he was about to be killed. She added that she had not heard anything like that, ending with a playful meow. Ark trembled nervously. A man suddenly drew attention to the scene and wondered whether the large man was being a little too Balzac. The man beside him reacted with surprise upon recognizing Balzac, the berserker of the S-class. The others immediately began discussing how extraordinary the wild warrior was. Someone remarked on how loud Balzac's voice was and wondered whether he wanted to get himself killed. Another person questioned why Balzac had come all the way to Voltana. Someone else turned the conversation toward Alan from earlier, noting that Alan seemed to have a certain stench about him and asking Emmy for her opinion. Emmy replied that they absolutely had no clue about anything. Balzac grew irritated by the commotion and demanded that his business be finished quickly. The woman responded by questioning whose fault the situation was, adding another playful meow. Ark quickly got back to his feet. Someone gasped in surprise, while the woman shouted in alarm upon realizing that he had escaped. The man then questioned what Ark's deal had been in the end. The crowd laughed loudly. Ark slipped into the crowd. A gasp rang out and he turned toward the sound. Every eye was fixed on him, filled with mockery and coldness. Whispers spread through the crowd, branding him as the weakest, trash, and incompetent. Ark begged them to stop. Someone challenged him, asking whether he was sure he could handle it. Unable to endure the stares any longer, Ark turned and ran. The man questioned what the heck he was doing. At the forest, Ark panted heavily, his eyes filled with nervousness. He could barely remember what had happened after being glared at by that man. He had fled in a frenzy to the nearby forest, and without Lean, he was still lost. It was too late to do anything now. Above all, in a town filled with worthless adventurers who had no value at all, Ark felt that he had no place where he belonged. A noise suddenly echoed through the forest. Ark flinched as something jumped out from the grass. After calming down, he realized what it was. It was a slimy surprise. Ark sighed at the sight of the slime and realized that this was an opportunity to test his skills. The instant kill magic he had received did not even work on the weakest slime. That was why it was renowned as a dud skill, although Ark himself had no idea how it actually worked. He tried to remember the incantation. Ark muttered the word associated with death. Suddenly, a black, skull-shaped figure appeared before Ark. He nervously wondered whether this was the instant death magic. The sight was even more frightening than he had expected. He questioned the strange skull-like shape as he gasped in surprise. Anxious about what would happen next, Ark hoped that even at level 1, there might still be a chance if the spell actually worked. The black skull slowly approached the slime. Then it began to fade away. Ark gasped in surprise, realizing that the spell had missed. Determined to try again, he launched another black skull toward the slime. He waited for a result, but the skull vanished once more. Ark finally accepted that nothing was happening after all. Suddenly, pain coursed through his body. He felt an overwhelming exhaustion and wondered what was happening to him. He considered whether he had exhausted his magical power by using it for the first time and whether this was the price he had to pay. He could not even defeat a single slime. Ark bitterly smirked as he recalled a memory from not long before. A hollow laugh escaped his lips, filled with despair, and he dropped to his knees as Lean's voice echoed through his mind. She had once made a promise with him, asking him to include her in his party someday. Ark clenched his teeth. One by one, images of Lean flashed before him. He saw a younger Lean with bright, innocent eyes calling his name. Then he saw a slightly older Lean, still smiling as she called for him. Another image followed, showing her growing and changing while always calling his name with a smile. Then came the image of Lean walking away beside Alan. Ark screamed in despair. Tears streamed down his face. Alone in the quiet forest, his cries echoed through the night. The wind rustled through the trees, filling the air with a gentle whisper. Eventually, Ark calmed down and sat silently. He realized there was no point in staying there forever. There was nothing waiting for him ahead, and he began considering whether he should return to his hometown. Suddenly, the slime jumped in front of him. Ark recognized it as the same slime from earlier. He acknowledged that it was still there and, upon thinking about it, realized that the slime was the weakest monster while he was the weakest adventurer. It was almost sad, but the two of them were practically comrades. Ark apologized to the slime for what had happened earlier. He stood up and decided that he would head back. Then he came to a sudden stop. A massive shadow stretched across the ground before him. Ark looked up and froze. Towering above him stood a massive beast. His eyes widened, and even the slime beside him flinched. The monstrous bear flicked out its tongue before reaching forward with its paws to attack. Ark stared nervously at the beast as the slime leapt away from them. The bear released a low growl and lunged forward. Ark barely dodged the attack. He sighed in relief at how close it had been, then realized that he had gotten lucky. This was definitely a killing bear, a monster recommended for extermination by adventurers with a C rank. There was no way a rookie like him should have been dealing with something like this. He could not understand why a creature like that had appeared so close to town. Regardless, the situation was bad news. They were going to get killed. Ark ran for his life. The bear struck him, sending him flying into a tree with a sickening thud. He coughed as blood splattered from his mouth. Ark wondered what the hell this was. Was this what happened to a loser who had been tossed aside like garbage? This was what level 1 amounted to. The beast crawled toward him. Ark was certain that he would die with the next attack. He had been abandoned by his childhood friend, mocked by adventurers, and now faced the possibility of dying in obscurity like a bug. That was the pathetic end waiting for him. Ark clenched his teeth. He refused to accept it. He was not going to die there. He had not even started anything yet. The only thing that would kill him there was. The bear growled loudly as it towered over him. Ark quickly extended his hand and cast a spell. Shadows burst from his palm, forming black skulls that howled toward the beast. They slammed into the bear, which shrieked in agony as the spell tore through it. A loud noise echoed through the silent forest. Then everything became quiet. Ark opened his eyes. He gasped in surprise when he saw the bear lying lifelessly on the ground, its mouth open and its eyes glazed over. Ark checked the beast and realized that it was dead as a doornail. He could hardly believe that the instant death spell had actually worked. He sighed to himself as the familiar reaction returned. Ark sat on the ground and realized that he had done it. He had survived. Before he could rest, however, a strange light began to glow nearby. Something mysterious started forming within its center. Engulfed by the brightness, Ark looked toward it in confusion. Chapter 2 began with a window appearing in the air. Ark exclaimed in surprise upon realizing that his skill level had increased and called for the points to be allocated. He stared silently at the floating window, intrigued by its appearance and wondering what it was. He tested whether he could keep up with it using his gaze and moved around as he considered whether he had heard something about skill levels or something similar, and whether it had anything to do with his abilities. As soon as Ark tapped the floating window, a faint chime echoed. Without warning, the skull before him snapped its jaws open wide. The screen shimmered and displayed his basic stats. His name was Ark, and his occupation was Daredevil Magician. A line of stats blinked into view and caught his eye. Ark wondered whether the contents were his stats, noting that his own level was still only 1. He was surprised to find instant death magic at level 20 and slowly began to understand the situation. It occurred to him that the ability might be one in which the skill itself could grow. He had never heard of such a skill and found the idea difficult to accept, but if it was true, it changed everything. Ark grabbed the floating window and requested more detailed information. The screen displayed a skill map, which surprised him because skills were presented on a map. He tapped the skill button, and the screen explained that the range was extremely short, making success from afar unlikely and making the skill better suited for close combat. By consuming points, he could unleash additional special effects and abilities. As Ark read the screen, he focused on the effective radius. In the heat of battle at a party, mages always took up positions in the rearguard, making it inevitable that the distance between them and their targets would grow wider. Because of that, there were not many decent success stories or verification record. Ark thought deeply about what had just happened. He had been practically next to that killing bear, and he wondered whether that was the reason the instant death had miraculously succeeded. Come to think of it, there was no pain in the part of his body that had been attacked by the bear. It seemed to have received the same healing effect as a normal level up. In any case, Ark's skill level increased. With the right abilities, he might be able to fight even at level 1. He wondered whether he really had to allocate the 20 skill points on the map. He decided to randomly assign some promising effects, and new symbols suddenly appeared on the screen map. Ark gasped in surprise when another symbol appeared. It resembled a coffin. He tapped the symbol, and a screen suddenly appeared. It explained that with instant death magic, he could defeat enemies and store their bodies in a separate dimension. Ark was surprised that he possessed an ability to store them away. Even if he sold the monsters he took down to the guild, handling all the dismantling and transportation alone was difficult. Having such an ability could only be useful. Ark decided it was time to put the ability to the test. He extended his hands and silently cast a spell in his mind. Coffin of the dead, dead. The killing bear slowly disappeared. When the beast had completely vanished, Ark was amazed by the result. The massive figure had disappeared entirely. Ark turned back to the screen. Only a few points remained, but another symbol had caught his attention. A screen appeared and explained that with magic, he could convert some of the defeated target's stats into his own abilities. Ark was shocked by the possibility. The cost was somewhat steep at 5 points, but the performance was extraordinary. Its effectiveness was still unknown, but for someone like him, who could not even raise his stats, this was the ultimate hope. The fact that there were no lies in the description had already been proven beyond doubt. Ark had no hesitation and acquired it. He used up all of his skill points and considered the result. He believed he had allocated them reasonably well. It was also incredibly convenient to be able to check his stats without using the ability appraisal. The floating window vanished into thin air. Before he knew it, after everything that had happened that day, Ark's heart had become as calm as if it had all been a lie. By some stroke of luck, he had tapped into his newfound power and suppressed the brink of death. For the first time, he had seen a glimmer of hope. Ark closed his eyes and resolved that nothing else mattered except this goal. His mind felt completely consumed by it. He had no idea how far he could go, but he was ready to take on the challenge. From that moment on, he would think of himself as reborn and seize this opportunity. The weakest of them all would finally become the strongest. At the Adventurers Guild, in the Boltana branch, night had fallen. Emmy's jaw dropped in shock when Ark told her that he wanted her to buy the monster as material. She froze as she stared at the massive beast Ark had brought in. She struggled to process what he had just done, especially after realizing that the monster before her was a killing bear. She could not understand why he possessed a monster rank C or higher. Ark simply explained that he had defeated it with instant death magic. Emmy gasped in shock, unable to form a complete response. Ark tried to reassure her and told her to relax. The crowd suddenly began to take notice. Someone recognized Ark as the weakest person from earlier that day and wondered why he had brought a killing bear. Another person pointed out that he had been empty-handed before, yet the monster had suddenly appeared. Someone else expressed amazement at seeing the real thing for the first time. Ark returned his attention to Emmy and reminded her that he wanted her to buy it. Still in a state of shock, Emmy acknowledged that he had actually obtained the monster. The door suddenly opened, drawing Emmy and Ark's attention toward the entrance. 3 men from the guild-affiliated demolition expert entered. The dead bear immediately caught one man's attention, and he stared at it with excitement. The man in the middle reacted with surprise upon hearing that they had obtained some top-notch materials. He wondered whether he really had to come all the way there just for this. Another man quickly approached the bear and exclaimed over the sight. The bear's oar, which should have been damaged during the battle, remained completely intact. The man in the middle noted that it was a C-rank bear and recognized that the hunter who took it on must have ventured into the dangerous territory of the forest. Cases in which both parties emerged from such an encounter unscathed were extremely rare, and he was visibly surprised by the condition of the material. The man then called Ark's attention and asked whether they could buy the materials from him. Ark eagerly agreed. The man immediately ordered the others to get it moving, and the men prepared themselves before setting to work. Emmy apologized for keeping Ark waiting and placed a bag in front of him. Inside were 20 shiny gold coins as his buyback reward, including an extra bonus based on the guild's quality assessment standards and taking the item's condition into account. A voice greeted him, and Ark stood at the exit before bidding farewell to Emmy. Emmy forcefully stretched a smile across her lips as Ark walked outside the guild. Ark thought about how he had received far more money than he expected. A coffin for the deceased could certainly come in handy. He went to the inn and considered how they now had plenty of funds for their future endeavors. He decided to start taking action early the next morning. Morning broke over the town. A man noticed Ark's diligence and wondered what had brought someone so young there so early. He recognized the little kid before him, while Ark explained that he wanted to get ready to casually dive into the dungeon, magician style. Ark showed him a gold coin, immediately drawing the man's attention to the money. The man approached Ark with a big smile and treated him as an esteemed adventurer already heading to the dungeon in the morning, praising his energy. He cheerfully fussed over the little troublemaker and admired his bravery before presenting all the essential equipment and supplies needed for exploration. The man started with a lantern, then showed Ark handy pouches for organizing his water and food. He also suggested upgrading his armor, pointing out that Ark's current outfit would not be sufficient. Overwhelmed by the man's words, Ark tiredly accepted everything and left the matter in his hands. After a moment, the man cheerfully admired how fabulous everything looked on Ark. He showed him potions, portable snacks, and even a handy hanging lantern. For water, he highly recommended a leather water flask, presenting it as the epitome of class. He had carefully curated enough supplies to last about 1 to 2 days. He also presented a pouch that could be strapped around Ark's waist, describing it as the perfect blend of style and practicality and emphasizing how convenient it was to keep his hands free. Ark agreed that it was a great idea and decided to take everything. He also wanted a map attached somewhere around the pouch. After thanking the man, Ark set out toward his destination. According to the map, the closest dungeon from there was in the eastern forest. When Ark asked the town sentry, he learned that it was about a 1-hour walk on foot. The journey felt like a trip through time. With resolve, Ark focused on his top priority, becoming stronger. The goal was to stack up stat absorption through instant death magic. The most efficient place where monsters ran amok was none other than the mighty dungeon. No one else ventured in alone, but for Ark, it was the only way to go deep into the unknown. He decided to give it a try and, to kickstart his own swagger, resolved to be himself. While walking into the forest, Ark sighed as he noticed that the forest had a bustling thoroughfare and that the path itself was easy to follow. He soon paused after noticing something. A guide had been posted, and Ark realized that there were even landmarks to help travelers find their way. He followed the guide and went deeper into the forest. Feeling thirsty, Ark took a sip from his leather bottle. While wiping his mouth, he realized that the dungeon of the east was right there. He stood at the entrance of the cave. Ark considered the dungeon an adventurer's workplace, with its nature documented accordingly. The dungeon was divided into areas called layers, creating a mysterious place in which every layer possessed its own unique structure and landscape. Naturally, the difficulty of exploration increased as adventurers descended into lower layers. The rewards were more than enough to compensate for the danger, which was why adventurers constantly rose to the challenge. For Ark, however, the real reward did not lie there. The dungeon was filled with various perilous elements, and the battle with monsters itself was his true goal. Ark slowly walked inside the cave, his eyes filled with nervousness and resolve. His first destination was the upper-level area, which should have been more than enough to test his upgraded instant death magic. Ark proceeded cautiously as he went deeper into the dungeon. Suddenly, his ear twitched at an unexpected sound. He turned toward its source and wondered what was happening. A pair of feet stepped out from the darkness, followed slowly by the appearance of goblins. Ark felt a little nervous upon seeing them. Goblins were pint-sized monsters that did not possess much individual strength, but their ability to wield weapons and work in groups made them smart enough to pose a threat capable of overwhelming opponents who were not in a party. These monsters were known as rank E losers, but someone like Ark was perfectly suited to serve as bait. Even so, the goblins' laughter echoed through the silent dungeon as the others stared at Ark with fierce eyes. Suddenly, one of the goblins leapt into the air and struck toward Ark. Ark remained calm, standing still as he stared at the enemy with confident eyes. Chapter 3 began in the dungeon, where the goblins cheered loudly as one of their kind bravely launched itself toward Ark. Ark welcomed the attack in his thoughts, considering the goblin the first to come ahead of the pack. In the world of instant death magic, distance was everything. The effective range he had strengthened yesterday was 1, with a success rate of 2. Ark urged him mentally to pull the enemies in as much as possible. The goblin leapt into the air. Ark recognized the moment and extended his hands toward it before casting his death spell. A black skull shot toward the goblin. The enemy screamed in agony before collapsing to the ground, lifeless. Ark rejoiced inwardly, satisfied that the mission had been accomplished. The goblins gathered and began discussing their plans. Ark flinched in surprise when they surrounded him. He calmly realized that they were being cautious, but that worked perfectly in his favor. Their formation created an ideal opening for another attack. Ark held out his hand and cast his spell again. A black skull surged toward one of the goblins, causing it to cry out in surprise before collapsing lifelessly in the blink of an eye. The goblin beside it reacted in shock. Another goblin struck at Ark, but he swiftly dodged the attack. He seized the goblin by the head and cast his spell directly on the enemy, ending its life instantly. Ark noticed that no matter how many times he unleashed his 3-hit combo, the dreaded fatigue never came. His effortless dodge of the previous attack was likely connected to what the window had stated. Converting a target's defeat with an instant death spell boosted his own stat. With this ability, Ark realized what he could accomplish. He completely defeated the goblins and marveled at how goblins apparently could not level up. He then eagerly called for his stats, causing the floating window to appear and reveal his current status. Ark acknowledged that using the ability had become easier after enhancing its range and probability. More importantly, he wondered whether it increased his stats as much as a regular level up or perhaps even more. He clenched his fist as he realized that with every enemy he defeated, his body became incredibly more agile. The benefits of soul retrieval had to be immense. Logically, if the process continued successfully, he would eventually be able to use magic endlessly. Suddenly, Ark noticed the equipment left behind on the ground. He wondered whether this meant he could store monster equipment as well. He halted when he noticed the darkness ahead. A side tunnel appeared to extend into it. Ark slowly entered the darkness and noticed that the light did not reach either wall. The space was only a little square area, yet something about it felt off to him. Suddenly, a beast stepped out of the darkness, leaving Ark standing in surprise. More beasts emerged with excitement. They were orcs, monsters with savage natures that resembled cats while possessing physiques superior to humans. They favored heavy weapons such as large clubs and axes. Ark realized that the rank of the monsters emerging from the darkness was beginning to rise. The orcs growled and attacked together, launching themselves toward him with their weapons. Ark felt slightly nervous as he recognized how surprisingly quick they were for their size. One orc raised its weapon and swiftly swung it toward Ark. He quickly dodged the attack and immediately cast his spell on the target. A black skull surrounded the enemy, and the orc fell to its knees while screaming in agony. Ark noticed the difference from the goblins. Unlike them, the orcs showed no hesitation. Another orc launched itself toward Ark with its weapon raised and ready to strike. Ark realized that he could see their attacks. He swiftly dodged the incoming blow and immediately faced another enemy approaching him. Ark ran toward the orc and activated his spell, casting it on the enemy coming toward him. In an instant, the orc fell lifelessly to the ground. Another orc began sweating nervously. Ark sighed as he realized that even the attack he had just dodged would have been impossible for him to evade moments earlier. Only the first absorption had increased his speed. He had originally intended to focus on effective range, which was his weakness, but he could now create a close combat state that was perfect for instant death. Ark stood calmly while surrounded by the orcs. The orcs attacked him together, but their eyes widened in surprise when Ark suddenly vanished from their sight. He reappeared behind them, equally amazed by their speed, and his sudden presence caused the orcs to flinch in surprise. Ark stepped forward and noted that only 3 remained. The orcs looked at him with fear. Ark acknowledged their condition before casting his spell once again toward the cowering orc. Afterward, Ark took a bite of his snacks. Even after adding 5 more orcs to his defeated enemies, his level still had not increased. It seemed that higher-level monsters did not provide enough experience compared to killing bears. Ark fell silent as he remembered hearing that orc meat was supposed to be delicious. He could probably expect a good amount of money from selling the ones he had stored. Ark suddenly stopped when a staircase appeared in the rocky dungeon. Below it, he noticed a glimmer of light. As he entered, the brightness made him squint. He continued walking deeper inside until he found himself filled with awe at what he saw. The ceiling was lined with stones that appeared to be the source of the light surrounding the area. Ark stared at the breathtaking view. There was an entire forest and even a river. He wondered if this was the change between layers. It was difficult to believe that this place was still a dungeon. Since it was so bright, he realized that he no longer needed a lantern. Suddenly, a voice called out to him. Ark wondered whether it was the sound of people. A man called out from nearby, and Ark waved toward them. He wondered if they were other adventurers. Confused by the commotion, Ark tried to understand what was happening. 3 adventurers suddenly ran toward him. One of the men grabbed Ark and checked whether he was all right. Confused by their actions, Ark wondered if something was wrong. Another man took a closer look at Ark and realized that a child was all alone in a place like this. He reacted with disbelief at Ark's recklessness and expressed concern for him. The bearded man stared at Ark, while Ark awkwardly stared back. The man questioned how Ark had managed to wander into a place like this and asked whether he was injured. Ark simply explained that he had fought some monsters but insisted that it was nothing serious and that there was no need to worry. The man's eyes widened in shock. He could not believe that Ark had gone into battle all alone and questioned whether he was trying to get himself killed. Ark denied having any intention of doing so. The man remained astonished by Ark's recklessness and wondered whether he had truly gone on a solo expedition. While gripping Ark's shoulder, the man was suddenly met with a gentle slap from the woman's hand. She grabbed his hand and pointed out that, since everything was fine, there was no reason to make an issue of it. More importantly, she explained that they were actually on their way back to the surface. She then offered Ark the chance to join them if he was interested. Another man laughed and remarked that they had managed to obtain a ton of orc meat this time. He urged everyone to hurry back so they could turn it into cash. The other man agreed, considering it lucky that they had happened to meet in this safe zone, and suggested that they escort everyone back to town. Ark wondered whether the area was truly safe and what exactly was going on. The man realized that Ark still did not know about it and explained that, for reasons unknown, dungeons contained places like this. He described the area as a total enigma, surrounded by mystery, where monsters could not enter. It served as a resting point for adventurers before they headed back toward the surface. Ark realized that this was a safe zone and that people could make use of places like this. There seemed to be another mechanism within the dungeon that could be utilized. The man suddenly prepared everyone to leave. Ark quickly indicated that he would remain where he was. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the area. The man turned toward the source and reacted in confusion. A pair of wounded feet emerged from the forest, followed by several wounded men. The man gasped in surprise at the sight. One of the wounded men desperately pleaded to be saved. The man urged him to calm down and reminded him that they were inside a completely safe zone. He then called for Azurii to recover the wounded man immediately. The woman named Azurii responded and healed him. She then asked for the man's condition, and he acknowledged that the wounded man had improved and thanked her. The group questioned what had happened. The wounded man responded by asking whether they had ever fought against a skeleton. Ark was slightly surprised by the question. The man muttered about skeletons, the bony creatures of the underworld. He acknowledged that undead monsters were certainly a troublesome bunch, but pointed out that skeletons were only D-rank. If they were seeking domination, there should not have been any problem at all. The wounded man agreed and indicated that the others felt the same way. However, he emphasized that something had happened earlier. The group listened as the wounded man began telling them what had occurred. Chapter 4 began in the dungeon with the wounded men revealing that they had encountered a giant skeleton. One of them explained that he had only come across one of them. Its body was similar to that of a typical human, but its size had been greatly augmented. In other countries, creatures of that size were called ogres or giant. Although individual differences existed, they could reach the rank of B and possess physiques nearly 4 meters tall, making them dangerous. A voice reacted with disbelief. The man wearing a hat questioned how a skeleton the size of an ogre could have appeared on the upper level. Since skeletons were only D-rank, there was no way they could win against such a creature, even as a party. Another wounded man reassured his companions that they had no reason to worry. His friends were by the back wall, while he had escaped through a passage among the trees. Given the creature's size, there was no way it could have passed through that route. Although he had panicked earlier, this place was already a safe zone. He asked whether they could take him outside with them after he rested a little longer. A sudden noise echoed through the area. Ark turned toward the source and wondered whether the others had heard it. The man nervously urged him not to panic. The noise erupted again, causing the men to react in alarm as they realized that the creature was coming once more. Another man confirmed that they could definitely hear it, while the first man struggled to determine where the sound was coming from. Suddenly, a massive skeleton appeared from the cliff. Ark and the man beside him stood frozen in shock. The monster grabbed its weapon, causing the man to shriek in fear. Ark watched the massive beast nervously as it climbed onto the cliff. The adventurers immediately began running away from it. Ark realized that the creature's mobility was incredible. It had leapt from that position with astonishing ease. The wounded men reacted in disbelief as they watched it climb the cliff and chase after them, unable to believe what they were seeing. The massive beast stood quietly for a moment before suddenly releasing a deafening roar. The adventurers instinctively understood the meaning behind that roar. The overwhelming difference in caliber revealed that they had encountered absolute death. The man stood frozen, wondering what someone like him could possibly do. His thoughts turned toward escape, urging him to run away as quickly as possible. He fell into deep thought before deciding to push the others back with Doug and Azuriai and entrust them to the exit. He then turned toward Ark and intended to have him come along as well, but his words stopped midway in shock. Ark had already begun running toward the monster. The man reacted in disbelief as Ark sped toward the skeleton ogre. Ark realized that he could completely keep up with its movements and that there was not much difference in their speed. His only lingering concern was whether his instant death spell would work. Ark cast his instant death spell on the skeleton ogre. The monster reacted in surprise as it stared at the approaching black skulls before screaming in agony. Ark questioned whether instant death could actually work on the undead. Doug cursed under his breath before reacting in shock at Ark's strength. He could hardly believe that Ark had dodged every one of the monster's fierce attacks. The other man silently understood why Ark had claimed to have taken on the dungeon by himself. Even so, this was still only a defensive battle. Ark was using some kind of magic, but it did not appear to be very effective. The man called out to Doug and informed him that he was taking the wounded as baggage. Doug urged him to run away. Meanwhile, Ark continued fighting the skeleton ogre. He could keep avoiding its attacks, but he wondered whether the creature possessed some kind of resistance to instant death. He had already lost count of how many shots he had fired, yet he possessed only this one skill. Ark launched himself toward the beast. He calculated that he needed only one more step to reach the very edge of his attack range before stepping forward. He held out his hand and cast his spell once again. However, no spell emerged from his hand. Ark realized that his magic power had been completely depleted. The monster suddenly raised its weapon overhead, preparing for a powerful strike. Ark could only react with dismay. Suddenly, the monster's hand exploded, and the meat from the baggage slowly fell to the ground. Ark's eyes widened in surprise. The man called out to the giant creature from a distance, drawing its attention. The skeleton ogre turned toward him and followed as he retreated into the forest. Trapped among the tall trees, the monster roared in frustration. Ark realized that the man had instantly taken advantage of the terrain, stealing away the monster's agility and reach. They did not rely solely on skills and items, they also made use of their surroundings. The monster roared again and swiftly struck a tree in an attempt to find its target. The man nervously hid behind the tree. He knew that all he could do was buy time, even though he had reluctantly taken on the task. By serving as bait, he hoped everyone else could escape to the surface. He was still thinking about what would happen afterward when Ark's sudden presence broke through his thoughts from behind. The man responded that the situation was one of utter despair, then jumped in surprise upon realizing Ark was there. Ark gestured for him to remain quiet. The man calmly questioned why Ark had not simply run away earlier with that kind of speed. Ark explained that he intended to take the monster down. The man doubted whether Ark truly believed he had a chance. The magic he had just witnessed appeared to have been a complete failure. Slightly embarrassed, Ark could not immediately respond. He explained that his instant kill magic was somewhat tricky to use. The man stood frozen as the words instant kill continued echoing in his mind. He grabbed Ark and reacted in disbelief upon learning that Ark possessed instant death magic, especially since it was considered such a disappointing skill. He wondered what they were supposed to do with something like that. The skeleton ogre stopped at the sudden noise. Ark quickly covered the man's mouth, silencing him as they tensely hid from the monster's sight. The monster passed through the tree where they were hiding. Ark quietly explained that he had been defeating monsters with instant death magic up until that point. However, he had no idea whether it would work against undead types. The man covered his eyes. Ark noticed his reaction and wondered what was wrong. The man insisted that those creatures were supposed to be already dead and questioned whether instant death would actually work on them. Even he could not judge the answer. With such vague knowledge, he could not understand how Ark had been able to make the decision to stand against that monster. Ark explained that even if he could not win, he would still remain there. He wondered whether the man thought the situation was any different for him. The man admitted that if everyone had run away together at that moment, there would definitely have been casualties. Ark pointed out that he was the only one who did not belong to their party in that situation. If the worst happened, he had simply thought it would not be a problem because it did not concern him. The man fell silent for a moment before admitting that he did not believe that was true at all. Ark explained that, just as the man had been surprised moments earlier, the prevailing belief was that the power he had been born with was nothing more than trash. He had never been given the opportunity to fight alongside comrades in a party. With only this skill, he had no choice but to live as an adventurer. Ark accepted that if he died there as a result, it would mean that both he and his skill were nothing more than a disappointment. The man wondered about Ark's determination. He then told Ark that if the two of them worked together, they could come up with a plan. They continued discussing their plans quietly. The man asked whether Ark was truly all right with the situation. Ark explained that it would be a shame for him to be the only one running away at that point. It would be better if he could also improve his chances of winning. The man smiled and introduced himself as Gaston, asking Ark for his name. Ark introduced himself as Ark. Gaston reacted enthusiastically to the name. The monster stopped upon hearing the shout. Gaston and Ark stood bravely as they waited for the right moment to attack. Chapter 5 begins 3 years ago. The man abruptly announced that Gaston was fired. Gaston stood in surprise, struggling to understand what had happened. The man explained that it was not a directive from the higher-ups. The level cap for those eligible for military service had been raised, with Gaston's cap set at 30. It was neither particularly bad nor particularly good, but given the current situation, it was no longer sufficient. The man instructed everyone, including the other candidates, to step back. They had all been through a lot up to that point. Gaston was stunned by the sudden change. Even if his level was inferior, there was still plenty of potential to be drawn from his experience, and he appealed to the captain. The captain acknowledged that, but pointed out that in this country, there were no evaluation criteria that placed level caps or skills above everything else. He also assured Gaston that the young ones he had been taking care of had higher upper limits regardless, and that they would easily fill the gaps in his experience. Gaston fell silent, unable to retort. One of the men then asked whether it was true that he was quitting. Gaston apologized and admitted that even the orders and his lack of power could no longer be hidden. The rest was up to them. The men pleaded with him to wait, but Gaston bitterly ran away from his comrades. Under the clear sky, Gaston recalled a memory. In a swift move, he ran forward while the skeleton orc chased after its target with a wide smirk. The monster roared loudly, and Gaston challenged it as he continued running. At the same time, he wondered how Ark could defeat such an opponent. Gaston recalled their earlier discussion. Ark had observed that the monster possessed a long reach, making it difficult to enter its effective range, and that its resistance to magic felt different from that of a typical monster. Ark had wanted to use death from a distance, where the chances of success would be higher. Gaston had questioned whether instant death magic depended on distance, and Ark had explained that, as far as he knew, that was how it worked. After pausing for a moment, Gaston proposed a plan. He would act as the decoy and take the attack, creating an opening for Ark just once. Ark had immediately recognized that taking even a single hit could kill Gaston. Gaston, however, reminded him that appearances were deceiving and that he had once served in the military. Even against a stronger opponent, they could manage somehow as long as they focused on defense rather than trying to defeat the enemy outright. A faint image of himself standing defeated in the rain resurfaced in Gaston's mind. He had not become an adventurer simply to run away again. Gaston stood his ground and waited for the monster to approach. He planned to lure it into the forest passage. With the obstacles positioned there, the monster would be unable to use wide sweeping attacks or its long hammer. Its attack options would be limited to sword strike. The monster raised its sword overhead. Gaston anticipated a vertical upper strike and focused on its weak point. He also considered positioning the annoying tree behind him. Suddenly, the monster rushed toward him. Gaston remained alert as he recognized that it had chosen to thrust forward. Even if he was inferior in strength and speed, he could handle attacks directed straight at him. His plan was to advance the moment the opponent began its attack. Hesitation would mean death. Gaston began advancing toward the monster. If he calmly considered the difference between their abilities, there was no way he could withstand an attack delivered with full force and speed. That was precisely when he would disrupt the monster's calculations. He would step forward and create a low-power timing that threw off its advance. However, if he received the blow diagonally at that point, the result would be dangerous. The monster drove its sword directly into Gaston's shield with forward momentum. Gaston gasped from the tremendous impact, and the force shattered his shield in half. The monster immediately pursued him and struck with another attack. Meanwhile, behind the monster, Ark quickly ran toward it. Gaston shouted as Ark advanced with determination filling his eyes. Gaston dramatically threw himself completely off balance, losing his footing. At that distance, Ark knew he could do it. He cast his spell, but a sudden force stopped him in midair. Ark was shocked by the unexpected interruption. With a single punch, the monster sent him flying through the air. Gaston was stunned by the sight, realizing that the monster had a hidden ace up its sleeve. He wondered whether it had snatched and assimilated it from another ogre's corpse. Ark cried out in pain from the impact, leaving Gaston worried about his condition. Suddenly, the skeleton ogre appeared in front of Gaston and attacked in a swift motion, tearing away the armor he was wearing. Ark opened his eyes wide. He quickly got back up, realizing that he had only fainted for a moment. He wondered what had happened to Gaston, concern filling his eyes. Ark flinched as the monster walked past him. When Gaston came into view, Ark immediately realized the danger and worried that the situation had become critical. Ark forced himself to stand, silently gasping from the pain. He might not have been completely immobile, but dodging attacks and closing the distance with quick movements was impossible. To make matters worse, the monster's hidden arms had made both its offense and defense on the ground even more troublesome. Ark clenched his teeth and desperately searched for a solution. He had to think of something, anything he could do. He was trapped in this situation, but then those glaring eyes resurfaced in his mind. The thought of Noma, whom he considered useless, suddenly echoed through his thoughts. Meanwhile, Gaston stared at the monster approaching him. His body trembled with fear as he cursed under his breath. He had known it would end up like this. If Ark was still alive, Gaston hoped he would run this time, believing that it was the right thing to do. Gaston's party members came to mind. He thought of Doug and Azuri, and felt sorry that their time together had come to an end after all the fun they had shared. Slowly, Gaston shifted his gaze upward. His eyes widened in surprise as Ark leapt into the air behind the monster. Ark saw this as their last chance. He intended to let gravity carry him downward as he closed in from above in one swift movement. All he needed was to grab hold of the monster's body. He was determined to confront death head-on. The skeleton ogre suddenly turned behind itself and released a loud roar. With Ark above Gaston, Gaston's eyes widened in shock. The skeleton ogre swiftly attacked Ark while he hung in the air, but Ark managed to dodge the deadly strike just in time by using the orc's dead body. Gaston's jaw dropped in shock. Ark invoked Dead Coffin, the casket of the departed. He then leapt above the monster and cast his instant death spell onto it, determined to bring it down. Meanwhile, on the other side of the dungeon, the adventurers froze when they heard a loud noise. Doug recognized it as the monster's war cry again and wondered what was happening now and what had become of Gaston. Suddenly, one of the men suggested giving up. Doug turned toward him angrily as the man trembled and reasoned that the monster would eventually overwhelm them, making retreat the better choice. Doug angrily grabbed the man by the collar and refused to let him speak that way about Gaston. He remained certain that Gaston would take care of all of them. A voice suddenly called for everyone to stay calm. Doug rushed outside, frustrated by how everything had turned out. He bitterly wondered whether there was really nothing they could do. Suddenly, the trees swayed violently. Doug stood frozen in shock as the skeleton ogre emerged from the forest and released a roar. Doug and Azuri froze, blurting out their startled reactions. The monster suddenly halted. Its eyes turned dull and lifeless before it dropped to its knees and collapsed onto the ground with a heavy thud. As the smoke slowly cleared, Doug flinched in surprise. Two silhouettes began to emerge through the haze, revealing Ark and Gaston. Doug stood frozen and wide-eyed before finally letting out a breath of relief. Without hesitation, he and Azuri rushed toward them. Doug leapt with joy, unable to contain his relief at seeing them return safely. Chapter 6 begins. The man glared coldly at Ark, who knelt before him in Siza. Ark wondered why the man was making him sit that way. The man asked whether Ark was an adventurer and what rank he held. Ark hesitantly answered that he was E rank. The man reacted with disbelief, pointing out that it was the initial rank of a complete beginner. He then angrily questioned whether Ark was seriously claiming that he had obtained all those materials by himself. Ark admitted that it was difficult to prove. Inside a certain shop in Boltana, he thought about the materials that had been shared with Gaston and the others. Even after dividing them among everyone, the amount each person received had turned out to be considerable. After Ark and Gaston's party had separated, Ark decided to organize the materials while he was back in town. He had tried to sort everything out when the man suggested that Ark might simply be a baggage carrier for a party. That explanation would have made sense, but Ark plainly stated that he did not have a party. The man frustratedly scratched his head and questioned whether Ark even realized that he was blocking his own escape route. He could not tell whether Ark was lying or simply being honest. To begin with, if the materials were decent, Ark could have sold them at the guild on the main street. The fact that he had come all the way to this back alley suggested that something about the materials was not normal. Ark innocently wondered whether the shop itself was normal. The man angrily clarified that this was not what he meant. To explain the situation, Ark revealed that he had initially been heading to the guild, but a problem had arisen. He believed it was because he had stood out with the high-rarity materials he had brought in. He had become involved with some suspicious adventurers who, just like the man before him, had made completely baseless accusations that the materials were stolen and demanded that he hand them over. One of them had threatened Ark and attacked him, forcing Ark to fight back and causing a commotion. Ark recalled that fighting within the guild was a violation, which meant he would not be able to show his face there for a few days. The man asked what kind of people they had been. Ark explained that they were a level 20 party led by a long-haired man whose hair was tied back, though the leader had been the first to run away. The man muttered that the same troublemaker was at it again. Ark curiously asked whether he knew the man. The man briefly confirmed that he did. That explained why Ark had come to sell the materials outside the guild. Depending on the materials and abilities involved, it might even have been possible to handle orcs. However, the man insisted that there was no doubt an E-rank could not have obtained such a monster alone. He shouted that there was no way an E-rank adventurer could have acquired the monster by himself. Ark offered to explain everything if the man would not become angry. He revealed that he had encountered the skeleton ogre after meeting a party led by a man named Gaston in the eastern dungeon. The man immediately recognized Gaston as the former soldier. Ark silently looked at him, and the man apologized before allowing him to continue. Ark explained that he had been alone at first, but had eventually teamed up with Gaston and defeated the skeleton ogre using instant death magic. Ark then asked whether the man believed him. The man tilted his head in disbelief. Of all things, Ark had used instant death magic. If it worked, it would result in a one-hit kill, making level and rank differences irrelevant. However, the man considered it ridiculous because there was no way such magic could connect so smoothly. Ark accepted that it was impossible to believe. The man then admitted that he no longer felt like hiding the truth. If the situation involved the kind of person Gaston was willing to lend a hand to, then the circumstances made more sense. Ark felt relieved. Gaston was truly trusted, and Ark had never expected him to help in this way again. The man finally broke the silence and gave Ark a thumbs up, accepting his explanation. He agreed to stop complaining and buy all the materials at once. Ark was slightly surprised by the man's decision. The man explained that this was also a business for him, so he would set the price with a safety net included, just in case. Ark had no problem with the arrangement. The man enthusiastically accepted and told Ark to wait a moment. While the man dismantled the dead monsters, Ark asked about the coat. The man grabbed it and examined Ark's interest in the black one. After checking the coat, he decided to include it as a bonus for the insurance. Ark caught the coat in his hands with some surprise and wondered whether that was really all right. The man assured him that there was no need to worry because it was nothing particularly fancy. He also pointed out that having something like that would make a newcomer look better. Ark silently acknowledged that he had never considered his appearance. His clothes were ragged, and he did not look like the kind of adventurer or mage people would readily trust. Ark swiftly put on the black coat. The man looked it over with satisfaction and determined that the length was not a problem. The man then explained that the town was overflowing with adventurers, ranging from newcomers like Ark to seasoned veterans. It was a relief that they could get by even without a large shop. Ark asked whether the man was a drifter and mentioned that he had come from a rural village himself. The man confirmed that he was. The town was quite sizable, with dungeons nearby, making it a well-known base for adventurers and providing easy opportunities to profit through material distribution. On the other hand, the abundance of monsters also meant that the country as a whole, Kretia, could be considered dangerous. The man explained that the king seemed quite concerned about the increasing number of monsters. He had even gone so far as to summon S-rank adventurers from outside. From what the man had seen, the summoning of S-rank adventurers seemed rather random. Aside from Alan, he wondered whether Balzark was the type to act for the sake of others. There had to be some special reason, perhaps money. The man then told Ark that he had earned enough to avoid kicking the bucket, and that the materials had been quite something as well. Ark caught the bag of coins in his hand. The man smiled widely and encouraged Ark to come to their shop first from then on. He proudly presented himself as the conscience of Boltana and asked Ark to take care of Gale's shop. Ark thought that considering national politics did not really mean anything to him. He then exited the shop. He was supposed to meet with Gaston, but it was not even early evening yet. Ark muttered his status, and a floating window suddenly appeared in the air. He silently stared at his status in surprise. Ark wondered whether this was really the amount he had absorbed from the skeleton ogre. His status was roughly 4 to 5 times what it had been before the battle. The skeleton ogre had certainly been a rare monster, but the difference was on an entirely different level. With this status, Ark believed that diving back into the dungeon alone should no longer be a problem. He decided to buy some items and return to the dungeon. Ark went back to the item shop and bought what he needed. By then, the sun had set. He figured that the darkness would allow him to work alone. A long plant suddenly struck toward Ark. He quickly dodged it. It was an E-rank carnivorous plant monster that greedily consumed small animals other than insects whenever they were small enough to fit inside its mouth. Another E-rank monster appeared, a forest wolf. It was a wolf that attacked people within its forest territory and was characterized by its speed, which remained undeterred by bushes. Ark expected them to become active outside the dungeon at night. He instantly defeated the beasts with his magic. Compared to bears and ogres, they were low-rank monsters, but Ark decided that it was better to absorb some of them, even if the amount was small. A forest wolf suddenly appeared behind him. Ark realized that it was still there and dodged in a swift movement. Surprisingly, the wolf simply passed him. Ark stared at the beast in confusion. It had passed him without even looking in his direction. He wondered why and whether it had been afraid of something from the beginning. Ark quickly turned toward the direction from which the wolf had come. A deep, echoing noise suddenly followed, and Ark stood firm, ready for whatever beast was approaching. A girl desperately running through the forest came into view. She called for help, and tears filled her eyes as Ark watched her in surprise. The girl rushed toward him before collapsing into his arms. Ark noticed her ears and tail and realized that she was a beastman. He wondered whether all her injuries had come from fleeing through the forest and worriedly tried to determine what had happened. The girl cried out about the village and everyone there, pleading for help. Ark could not understand a word of what she was saying. Then he realized that if she was not the reason the wolf had fled, something else must have been chasing her. Ark froze at the realization. He quickly stood and positioned himself in front of the girl, shielding her behind him. He stared into the forest and waited for whatever was going to emerge. Ark activated the spell in his hand and cautiously waited. He expected the creature to leap out, but nothing came. However, judging by the level of fear the girl had shown, someone was definitely chasing her. Ark could not afford to let his guard down. Suddenly, a massive wolf appeared. Its growl reached Ark's ears, and he immediately cast the spell in his hand without delay. The enormous beast had finally revealed itself. Ark cast his spell toward the beast's direction. The instant death spell struck its target, but there was no visible reaction. Ark initially thought nothing had happened, yet he could sense something. The creature was cautious. A loud cry echoed through the area, breaking the silence. Ark gasped in surprise. There was more than one cry, including the growl from before, that made three. The situation was becoming dangerous. Ark could not get within the range of the bushes while still protecting the girl. At the same time, dealing with multiple enemies at once was far too risky. Unsure of what to do, Ark searched for another option. His eyes filled with determination as he decided to give it a try. He remembered what had happened when he defeated the skeleton ogre. By defeating a special monster, he had gained a new ability. Ark recognized the ability and activated it without hesitation, using quadruple death burial. The ability had been obtained from a four-armed skeleton ogre. Once activated, the effective range and mana consumption of the next instant death spell would be quadrupled. However, charging time was required before activation. Ark extended his hand as black smoke began forming around it. The charging took some time, but his strongest attack was his best bet now, and he intended to put everything into it. He gritted his teeth and held his trembling hand firmly, trying to stop it from shaking. Suddenly, a wolf came into his view. Ark immediately sent the spell forward. A massive skull emerged from his hand and struck ahead. Ark stared at it with slight nervousness as the wolf watched cautiously. The spell swiftly passed through the bushes. A voice suddenly cried out in pain. Ark knew the attack had worked. With his current stats, the mana consumption did not leave him dizzy, meaning he could use the spell. The bushes rustled violently as Ark waited firmly for whatever would emerge. The other enemies had run off. That worked in his favor. After a moment, Ark reassured the girl that everything would be all right. He gave her a bottle of potion and instructed her to drink it slowly. The girl quickly drank the potion. After emptying the bottle, she sighed in relief. Suddenly, the girl fainted. Ark reacted in surprise as she fell asleep peacefully in his arms. He guessed that she had simply run out of energy and fallen asleep. Considering how frightened she must have been, it was understandable. This was not the time to grind levels. For now, Ark needed to take the girl back to Badlana. Before leaving, however, he did not forget about the beast. Ark cast Dead Coffin in his mind and looked toward the direction of the beast he had defeated. It should have landed. Ark extended his hand toward the forest. He then carried the girl on his back. He could not go chasing the beast deeper into the forest, especially with the girl with him. She took priority. As he thought about it, Ark remembered that something similar had happened before. Meanwhile, Alan's party continued their battle. The party defeated the monsters easily, and Alan acknowledged Lynn's good work. He then checked whether her level had increased. Lynn's level did not seem to have gone up just then. Alan considered whether monsters of that rank had become ineffective for her, but he quickly reassured her that there was no need to apologize. She had reached level 20 in only 2 days, which meant she was growing quickly. Their next goal would be to go a little deeper. Fione asked whether they were finished for the day and admitted that holding back was tiring. The magician, Dorothea, agreed. Meanwhile, the paladin, Eris, remained standing quietly. Lin stepped forward shyly and thanked everyone for helping her. She resolved to work even harder. Alan smiled and reminded Lin that they were all allies who spared no expense for one another, so she had no reason to feel inferior. Lin stared at him with awe. Alan then announced that it was time for them to withdraw and asked everyone to do so. Afterward, night fell. A sudden loud knock interrupted Alan. He smiled and greeted Eris before asking whether she wanted something. Eris entered the room and sat on his bed. She showed him a rolled paper containing more pressure from the king. The king wanted to know how the search for the keys was progressing. Alan smiled and reflected that, despite already doing everything they could, the king was still impatient. The reason S-rank adventurers like Alan were gathering in Krecia was not simply for monster hunting, as the town's rumors claimed. They had come at the request of the king who founded the territory, tasked with searching the deepest depths of the dungeons where the keys were said to rest. Alan did not know what powers or uses the keys possessed. What drew him to the place was the unusual nature of the reward, a noble title and land. No matter how powerful an S-rank adventurer was, meddling with the power of nobles was impossible. For the king himself to promise such an extraordinary reward felt suspicious. Alan wondered whether, if he obtained one of the keys, he could break off the request and leave with it. The reward was valuable enough to silence the nobility, but he questioned whether it was truly worth that much. Alan fell silent as he pondered the matter deeply. Eris then questioned how long he intended to coddle that girl and whether that was what the matter was really about. Alan explained that they should not rush Lin. Only a few parties besides theirs could reach the lower levels, so there was no need to hurry. Eris did not need to worry because Lin's talents were guaranteed. Until then, Alan's party had never had a healer with recovery skills. More accurately, they had never needed one because of their overwhelming combat prowess. The dungeon designated as the location of the keys was different, however. There was a monster plague. It was unlike anything Alan and his party had experienced throughout their lengthy adventuring career. The farther they progressed into the dungeon's lower levels, the more monsters spawned. It felt as though the dungeon itself was resisting their intrusion. The members of Alan's party were not lacking in strength. Yet within this strange dungeon, their recovery resources were constantly drained by the sheer number of monsters. That was when Alan discovered Lin. A healer compatible with Alan and his party was rarely seen. While lingering around the guild on the verge of giving up, they had coincidentally encountered a rare talent with a high-level cap and 3 priestly skills. To Alan, it had felt like a miracle. Eris worried that if they spent who knew how many days waiting for Lin to grow, Balzark's party might steal a march on them. Among the adventurers gathered there, Balzark was the only one who truly stood out. Alan believed that Balzark's group was probably evenly matched with theirs. Eris insisted that this was precisely why they needed to act. Alan smiled and reassured her that everything was fine. Balzark's group had a healer problem of their own. He also questioned whether adventurers from an unfamiliar area would actually cooperate with the infamous Balzark. Eris fell silent. Alan further pointed out that the request involved 3 keys in total. Even if Balzark's party reached one of them first, it would not be a problem. Eris accepted the point and became determined. As long as they obtained all 3 keys in the end, everything would be fine. She resolved to obey whatever their leader decided. Alan then asked whether there was any other information. Eris had nothing further to report. Their party had taken the north, while Balzark had taken the west. The labyrinth of verdant greenery to the east remained untouched. According to what she had gathered from the guild's records, the people of Boltana could manage the middle levels at best. Alan smiled upon hearing this. With little need for concern about the depths of the dungeons to the east and west, there was even more reason for them to take their time and proceed carefully. For the moment, Eris agreed. The girl ran through the forest, gasping for breath. Her eyes were wide with fear as she glanced over her shoulder, desperately calling for someone to save her. The beast was closing in fast. She cried out when it nearly reached her. Suddenly, a man appeared. In an instant, the beast vanished from sight. The girl stared at him, her eyes filled with relief. When she opened her eyes again, the shop owner asked whether she was awake. The girl immediately sat up and wondered where she was. The shop owner explained that she was in his place in Boltana, Gale's shop, and that she had been brought there the previous night. He pointed toward Ark and explained that Ark was the one who had carried her there. Ark recalled that the girl had been attacked by monsters and that, before she passed out, he had given her a potion to drink. He wanted to know whether she was feeling alright. The girl's eyes widened as she realized that Ark was the same person who had appeared in her dream earlier. She immediately assured him that she was alright and expressed her gratitude for helping her in such a dangerous situation. She introduced herself as Fatina. Ark introduced himself as well, and Fatina quietly addressed him as Ark-sama. The shop owner interrupted and explained that he had heard a little about the monster from the previous day. He asked Fatina to tell them what had happened if she was willing. Fatina fell silent for a moment before explaining that she came from a village a little south of a dungeon. Monsters had always appeared around the village from time to time, but the soldiers and the village's mage had always been able to handle them. The huge, black monster from the previous day had been different. No one had been able to stop it. Ark asked what the monster looked like and whether there had seemed to be more than one. Fatina was confused by the question of there being more than one monster. As far as she knew, there had only been one. She was not really sure what it looked like because it had been dark and she had not gotten a good look at it. Ark remembered the roar he had heard back then. Fatina then recalled that magic had not worked on the creature at all. The spells seemed to vanish before they could even reach it. The shop owner explained that this was probably due to magic defense. Some of the stronger monsters possessed an annoying ability that was similar to a wall appearing around their bodies. When magic struck it, the spell simply bounced off. Ark considered the implication of stronger monsters possessing such an ability. Fatina continued by explaining that once everyone realized neither swords nor magic were working, they scattered in every direction. She had simply been the one the monster pursued, and that was when Ark-sama had saved her. The shop owner noted that the others had scattered as well. Some of them might have ended up in nearby villages or taken shelter in Boltana. Fatina suddenly stood up from the bed, remembering that she needed to find the other villagers. Her feet immediately stumbled beneath her, and she gasped in shock. Ark caught her just in time. He reminded her that she had not fully recovered and should take it easy. Fatina blushed in embarrassment and thanked him, insisting that she was fine and needed to go. The shop owner stopped her and pointed out that even if she wanted to search for her friends, she could not go looking for them in her current state. He insisted that she at least put on the clothes he had laid out for her and eat something first. Fatina objected, unwilling to ask him to go so far for her. The shop owner then changed his approach, explaining that if people saw a girl dressed like that leaving his establishment, it would cause a serious mess for him. To him, it was a matter of life and death. He called Ark over and had him accompany him to the shop to get something to eat. After a moment, they had breakfast. The shop owner let out a deep sigh as Ark stared at him. He questioned what Ark was staring at, and Ark brushed it off as nothing. While eating the bread, Ark found it good. Between allowing them to stay there the previous day and everything else he had done, Gale was truly a caring man. Afterward, Fatina, Ark, and Gale went to her village. Exhausted soldiers sat throughout the area. Cries from the people echoed around the village, while others treated the wounded. The damage had been severe. Even without the increase in monsters, the village had already been low on troops. Fatina looked around with worry in her eyes. A leader stood and ordered the troops to divide and search each of the surrounding villages. They were to check on the evacuees and assess the other damage as well. He also gave them a letter that needed to be delivered to the third port and permitted them to use a swift horse. The troops responded in unison. The leader then announced that he would handle things with the guild while they took care of everything there. The troops responded once again. Two women suddenly stood in surprise. Fatina gasped when she saw them and immediately ran toward them. One of the women was her auntie, who was relieved to discover that Fatina was safe. Gale and Ark watched them silently. Fatina's auntie explained that they still did not know whether everyone in the village was safe, but the people who had escaped there were not badly injured, thanks to the soldiers. Fatina smiled in relief, grateful that they had found them. Ark slowly slipped away, thinking that now was the time to leave. Gale noticed him and asked where he was going. Ark explained that he was going after the monster. Gale reacted in disbelief, pointing out that Ark was talking crazy again. Fatina looked at them with a confused expression. Ark explained that everyone was short on manpower, and there was no telling how long the monster would remain unchecked under the current circumstances. He saw no reason why he should not defeat it. Gale questioned where Ark had gotten such confidence. Ark knew that one reason was his desire to defeat a powerful monster and absorb its strength. However, allowing the security of the area to collapse would be bad for everyone. Suddenly, Fatina called out for them to wait. If Ark was going after the monster, she wanted to accompany him. Her auntie reacted in surprise, unable to understand what Fatina was thinking. Ark silently stared at Fatina. Fatina insisted that she would do anything she could to help. Her auntie tried to stop her, but Fatina stepped forward and pleaded with Ark-sama to hear her out. Fatina explained that her parents had died of an illness when she was young. After they were gone, the villagers had raised her and cared for her. Now, she wanted to save all of them and do everything in her power to help. Fatina bowed deeply and begged Ark to let her fight alongside him. Ark sighed and began to respond, but Gale cut him off and stopped him. Gale respected Fatina's spirit, but if she intended to fight, she needed the strength to do so as an adventurer. Gale proposed that they first go to the guild for a skill appraisal. If Fatina possessed the power to fight, that would be one thing. If she did not, then she would have to give up. Fatina accepted the condition and understood. Gale agreed and grabbed Ark by the shoulder, telling him to go along with the plan. Ark gasped in confusion. Gale explained that he was busy with everything happening there and that Ark had already helped him enough. That should be sufficient. Fatina waited excitedly for Ark's decision. Ark sighed and agreed. Gale instructed them to return to the store once they had finished. Fatina happily thanked him and urged Ark to go with her. Her auntie could only mutter in disbelief at Fatina. At the guild, Fatina noticed that Ark had put on a hood and wondered why. Ark began to explain, then abruptly changed the subject and directed her to register as an adventurer at the counter. Once she registered, she would receive a free appraisal. After a moment, Emmy trembled in disbelief. She questioned whether the result could really be correct. The woman beside her reacted in astonishment. Fatina nervously wondered whether her abilities were not very good. Emmy immediately clarified that this was not the problem at all. Fatina's level limit was 100. Fatina innocently wondered whether that was great. Emmy emphasized that it was far beyond merely great. Their guild had never had someone with a level cap of 100. The other women added that Fatina possessed 4 skills. The crowd reacted in shock. Things quickly became extremely hectic. Fatina was found to possess 4 skills. The first was swordsmanship, an unparalleled swordsmanship talent and the highest level of sword skill. The second was supplemental growth, which provided better increases in abilities when leveling up. The third was magic breaker, which granted high resistance to magic and similar forces. Lastly, holy magic granted healing and other holy magic abilities. Ark recognized it as a flawless build for a vanguard. Fatina was overjoyed that she could fight. Immediately afterward, a wave of frenzied adventurers began trying to recruit her. Ark had expected this. He quickly grabbed Fatina and got her out of there. Fatina panted heavily, shaken by what had happened, and expressed her gratitude to Ark. Ark briefly acknowledged Fatina's gratitude. Fatina admitted that she had never realized this was how adventurers found parties and felt that she still had much to learn. Her enthusiasm was unmistakable. Meanwhile, Ark reflected on his decision to leave with good intentions. Given Fatina's talent, it might have been better for her to end up with a proper party. It reminded him of that time. Fatina's voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts as she asked whether Ark had a party. Ark fell silent before explaining that his level cap was level 1 and his only skill was instant death magic. Fatina happily realized that he was alone and wondered whether her abilities would be useful if they fought together. Ark was surprised by her reaction. He acknowledged that he was on his own, then considered what he had heard. Fatina, too, would likely. Fatina suddenly recalled how many people had tried to recruit her earlier. However, if she was going to form a party, she had already decided that Ark-sama was the only person she wanted to form one with. She had made that decision when she first asked to accompany him. Ark wondered why she would go so far and admitted internally that he had not expected such a response. Fatina explained that Gale-san had told her that morning that Ark had not only saved her from the forest but had also carried her all the way back while searching for a place where she could stay. In the end, he had even gone to Gale's shop to ask for help. Because of that, and because of the kind of person Ark was, she trusted him more than anyone else. If she was going into battle with anyone, she wanted to fight by his side. Ark fell silent. Fatina wondered whether that reason was not good enough. Ark understood. To him, it was more than he could have asked for. He asked Fatina to form a party with him and proposed that they take down the monster together. They shook hands. Fatina happily accepted, and Ark likewise counted on her. Afterward, they returned to the shop and filled Gale in on what had happened. Gale wore an irritating expression that made it clear he had expected things to turn out this way, which annoyed Ark. Gale reflected on their mismatched level caps of 1 and 100 and found the combination interesting. Ark wondered whether Gale was not concerned after hearing about his supposedly useless abilities. Gale admitted that learning Ark was the rumored weakest guy had shocked him. However, he had also heard about the skeleton ogre and the brawl from the previous day through the guild. Given that, Ark had to be really strong. Ark became curious about what Gale meant. Gale chuckled at his curiosity before unpacking a box. Since they were heading to a dungeon to level up, Fatina could pick up some equipment there. He had gathered gear for a vanguard swordsman along with other necessities. Fatina was amazed but pointed out that she had no money. Gale assured her that she had plenty from Ark and did not need to worry. Fatina was excited by this revelation. Ark glared at Gale, wondering just how much the old man had them insured for. Gale explained that Fatina would probably be heading to the upper levels, so standard armor would be enough. The real issue would be her weapon. Fatina's swordmaster skill would put a great deal of strain on the blade, so he had prepared something specifically with that in mind. Gale presented her with a silver sword. He explained that silver possessed anti-magic properties, making it especially effective against undead. It was the best one he had in stock. Fatina stared at the valuable weapon in awe and resolved to treasure it. Gale then grabbed Ark and presented him with a short sword. Even a mage without the proper skill could use it as a close-range weapon in a pinch. Ark wondered whether Gale was playing favorite. Afterward, Gale sent them off outside. Fatina thanked him for all his help and Gale wished them well, reminding them to be careful and watch each other's backs. Ark simply noted that everything was ensured. On the way to the dungeon, Ark explained his abilities and what he knew about how adventurers leveled up. He then asked Fatina whether, since they would be in a party together, she could drop the honorific Sama when speaking to him. Fatina immediately refused. To her, that was a completely separate matter. Being in the same party did not change the fact that Ark had saved her life. Ark wondered whether she really had to keep using it. Fatina firmly maintained that she did. Ark accepted it. Afterward, they reached the eastern dungeon. Ark explained that from there, they would be fighting monsters in the upper levels. Since only the person who landed the finishing blow gained experience, Fatina would take the lead while he supported her. As long as the monsters were D-ranked, he could help her, so she did not need to worry. Fatina accepted and placed herself in his care. Ark remained somewhat concerned that he had no first-hand experience with growing through the usual leveling system and normal skills. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the dungeon. They cautiously turned toward the source of the sound. A man came running toward them while desperately calling for someone to save him. An orc and several goblins were pursuing him. The orc glared fiercely at Ark and Fatina. Fatina's eyes filled with nervousness. The man desperately ran from the monster. Ark wondered why dungeon monsters were coming out and what was happening. Fatina's cry of Ark-sama broke through his thoughts. The man fell to the ground as the goblins slowly approached him, their weapons ready to strike. Fatina realized that they were helping the man, and Ark confirmed it, recognizing that they had suddenly been thrown into real combat. Fatina rushed in without hesitation. With a swift motion, she slashed a goblin and defeated it instantly. Ark watched in shock, remembering that she had said she had never held a sword, not even just for fun. Fatina continued to cut down the goblins with single strikes, moving with remarkable speed. Ark realized that this was the power of the sword master. Fatina could read her enemy's movements and instinctively knew how to swing the sword. Holding her sword tightly, she recognized this as her own power, the power she wielded to protect everyone. Suddenly, a large beast appeared behind her. Ark warned her of the danger, but in the blink of an eye, the orc's arm flew through the air as Fatina sliced through its body. Ark was struck by how fast she was. The orc collapsed lifelessly onto the ground. The man muttered in disbelief while panting heavily. Suddenly, a hand placed a bottle on top of his head. He immediately stood up in surprise. Ark asked what had happened there, and the man expressed that he wanted to know the same thing. He explained that monsters had burst out of the wall out of nowhere. Then he stopped upon realizing something and began to tremble. He recognized the person before him. Ark told him to forget about what had happened at the guild and asked where his companions were. The man immediately remembered them. They were being attacked right down below. Although he knew it was selfish to ask, he desperately begged for help. He knelt and continued pleading for them to save his companions. Ark and Fatina quickly rushed inside the dungeon. They suddenly stopped and looked down below, where a group of beasts surrounded the adventurers. The men desperately tried to keep the beasts away. One of them cursed in frustration, unable to understand what was happening. An orc roared and charged toward its target, but a boot suddenly slammed into its face, stopping its attack. The orc staggered backward from Ark's blow. The men froze in shock. Fatina dashed forward just like Ark and leapt into the fray, slicing through the orc's body with a single strike. Ark urged Fatina onward, and she immediately followed. Together, they charged at the remaining beasts in their path. Fatina easily defeated a skeleton monster with one swift strike. Ark realized that she had probably leveled up a little from the earlier battle, yet she was already overwhelming D-rank enemies. The supplemental growth was an incredible skill. The sounds of their attacks echoed through the dungeon as they continued fighting. The men watched in astonishment, realizing how strong Fatina was and wondering who she could be. Fatina sighed as she and Ark stood over the corpses of the beasts they had slain. The men hesitated before realizing that Ark and Fatina had saved them. Fatina checked whether they were all right. After a few moments, the tension began to ease. One man acknowledged that they had truly saved them, while another apologized for putting them through such trouble. A third admitted that it had been their fault and thanked them. Ark brushed it aside, no longer concerned about what had happened. More importantly, he wanted to know where all the monsters had come from. They had appeared not only on an upper floor but even at the entrance. The man explained again that the monsters had burst out of the wall. He could not understand it. Another man added with a horrified expression that there had been absolutely nothing there, yet before they realized it, they had already been surrounded. There had been no footsteps or even the sound of breathing. Fatina asked whether something like that happened inside dungeons. The man had never heard of such a thing. They had been to this dungeon plenty of times before, and nothing like this had ever happened. Ark realized that something was clearly wrong. There was also the matter of the skeleton ogre, and something about the situation was not right. Suddenly, Fatina's ears twitched. She turned toward the noise, her expression sharpening. Ark asked what it was, and Fatina detected the sound of footsteps deeper inside, along with screams. One of the men gasped in surprise, while another could not hear anything. Fatina explained that Beastkin had good hearing. She then realized that they were coming. A group of men appeared in the distance, running desperately with fear etched across their faces. Behind them followed a massive beast. One of the men recognized it as an ogre. The ogre fully emerged from the shadows, and the adventurers scrambled away in panic. The sight left the men horrified as they fled from the approaching ogre. The adventurers screamed in terror as they ran for their lives. Ark's mind raced as he realized they were panicking and needed to be evacuated. He called out to Fatina, telling her that they would deal with the ogre while she handled the people. Fatina immediately agreed, and together they rushed toward the towering beast. The ogre swung a massive fist at them, but Ark narrowly dodged the blow. He recognized that it was a flesh-and-blood ogre, and despite its enormous body, it was remarkably quick. Fatina darted behind the ogre, but the beast's gaze suddenly snapped toward her, causing her to flinch in surprise. The ogre threw a large stone at her, but Fatina nimbly dodged the attack with fluid, precise movements. The men watched in nervous anticipation. Ark realized that even in its weakened state, the ogre was still at least a C-rank threat, and without obstacles around them, it would be even more dangerous. However, judging by Fatina's movements, the experience she had gained earlier, and her supplemental growth, she should be able to hold her own if she was given an opening. Ark created a decoy by casting a spell toward the ogre. The beast effortlessly swatted the spell aside with a sweep of its hand. Taking advantage of the distraction, Fatina rushed toward the ogre and quickly closed the distance. As she reached its feet, she struck, slicing through one of its legs. The ogre cried out in pain and clutched its wounded leg. Fatina leapt into the air, her sword flashing as she aimed for the beast's mouth. Ark marveled at her strength, realizing once again how incredible high-ranked skills were. Fatina drove her sword deep into the ogre's mouth before quickly jumping away from its body. The men froze with their eyes wide in shock. The dungeon echoed with the heavy thud of the ogre's body hitting the ground. Ark realized that despite having only just become an adventurer, Fatina was already a first-rate one. Fatina landed gracefully on the ground as the adventurers watched her in stunned silence. One by one, they began whispering in awe. Ark wondered what he would be capable of if he had a skill like that. Fatina's concern for everyone's safety broke through the silence. Ark fell quiet, deciding that there was no point in dwelling on what he could not change. Afterward, they went outside the dungeon. Ark observed that no one seemed to be seriously injured and decided that they should stick together just in case and head back to town. Fatina wondered what they should do about the others. Ark decided that they should return for now as well, since continuing under the circumstances would be a bad idea. Ark suddenly stopped and remembered the monster Fatina had killed earlier. He wondered whether there had really been only that few of them. Fatina admitted that she had been so caught up in everything that she had not been keeping track and apologized. Ark immediately reassured her that it was not her fault. He then urged everyone to go. Ark considered the fact that the monsters had not been killed by instant death magic, meaning dead coffin should not have triggered. He could not understand what was happening. The orc's dead body slowly faded. Half a day later, at the guild, Emmy was overwhelmed by the situation. The man explained that orcs had suddenly come out from the walls and that everything had been chaotic. Another man added that there seemed to be ogres and skeletons on the upper levels. With Boltana apparently dried up, he suggested that it might be time to move on. One man demanded to know whether the guild knew something and angrily insisted that they stop hiding the information. Fatina quietly observed that things seemed to be getting out of hand. Ark suspected that someone among the adventurers knew what was happening. All sorts of strange events were occurring. Unique monsters were appearing on upper levels, a mysterious black monster had appeared, and more monsters were coming from the walls. Ark began to wonder whether the cause of all these events could be connected to the dungeons. Ark suddenly called out to Fatina, and she immediately responded. He explained that facing the enemies they could see was one thing, but they were still amateurs when it came to the mysteries of the dungeons. For now, he believed it would be better to focus on the black monster. He also decided that the aunties could stay at the inn. Fatina stared at him with a gleam in her eyes. She agreed with his reasoning and realized that she still had to become stronger. Ark noticed that her spirit seemed to have returned somewhat. Meanwhile, at the Boltana Eastern Gate Watchtower, one man mentioned that the guild was apparently raising a commotion about the Eastern Dungeon. Another man wondered whether the monsters were increasing again and questioned whether the guild could not handle them despite the large influx of adventurers. The first man explained that the dungeon had existed for ages and had never caused a commotion like this before. The other man decided to take a look and used the scope. The man added that, from what he had heard, the new adventurers were simply too weak. The other man gave no response. The man opened his eyes and told him to stop ignoring him, but he paused when he noticed the other man trembling. He asked what was wrong. With a horrified expression, the trembling man stared ahead and wondered what the hell it was. Everyone gathered in front of the Adventurers Guild as the chief of the Boltana branch addressed the crowd. He explained that they were aware of the increase in monster activity in and around the dungeons. The government had also discussed the recent lack of manpower with them. Following yesterday's attack and today's incident at the dungeon, the government had issued a request for them to address these incidents by recruiting mercenaries from among the adventurers. Gaston repeated the chief's words thoughtfully. From a management standpoint, recruiting mercenaries for the government was a drastic move. Adventurers and discipline were like oil and water, but a quick response would at least reassure the common folk. The receptionist handed out papers containing the requirements. A man in the crowd glanced at his copy and asked his companion what he thought. The money looked good, but the man beside him pointed out that if the pay was that good, then the job had to be equally dangerous. After hearing about what had happened, it was understandable. Doug sighed and muttered that it sounded like a pain in the ass and that there was no way he would do it. Several moments passed, but no one stepped forward. Gaston glanced at Ark and commented that he had never guessed Ark would form a party. Phaeton brightly confirmed it and asked Gaston and everyone else to treat her well. Gaston squinted slightly, finding her dazzling, then placed his hands on Ark's shoulders and expressed how seriously happy he was for him. Ark looked puzzled by Gaston's expression and asked what was with that look. Doug chimed in, pointing out that Ark would naturally rather team up with a girl than an old guy like Gaston. Gaston loudly protested the harsh remark. Ark brushed it off and explained that, anyhow, he and Fatina were going. If anyone heard anything, they should keep each other informed. Gaston nodded, agreeing that there was no problem. Thanks to the two of them, they had already gotten a grasp of how dangerous the dungeon currently was. He added that monsters bursting out of the walls and problems like the skeleton ogre kept happening, causing an uproar because no one knew what was going on. Doug suddenly suggested that perhaps they should just run off somewhere else. The others stared at him as though they were calling him a coward. Doug quickly told them to stop looking at him like that, insisting that it was only a joke. Suddenly, the people gathered around looked confused as the sound of a bell rang out. A woman identified it as coming from the east. At that moment, the receptionist quickly alerted the branch chief. The chief shouted for everyone to calm down and explained that the sound was an alarm from the gate. Judging by the color of the signal, they needed to be on maximum alert. Just then, a guard forced his way through the crowd, shouting for people to let him through. When he reached the front, he announced that a swarm of monsters was heading toward the town. Shock spread through the crowd at the terrible news. The guard added that the swarm was unbelievably huge. The adventurers began murmuring among themselves, confused by the mention of a swarm. Another person gasped at the possibility that the dungeon had overflowed. The guard fell to his knees in horror as he revealed that there were 100 of them, no, hundreds. Everyone froze in fear. The branch chief quickly regained his composure and ordered everyone to forget about procedures and work together to protect the town. However, the adventurers hesitated. Ark wondered if the monsters had really been increasing since that morning. Doug trembled as he insisted that there was no way the people of this town could handle hundreds of monsters. Azuri anxiously asked what they were supposed to do. Suddenly, Gaston spoke up and declared that there was something they could do. Ark turned to him in surprise. Gaston told everyone to calm down and listen carefully. There was a method for dealing with swarms like this. When a swarm consisted of mixed species, there was always a commander leading the others. If they managed to take that commander down, the rest would scatter. One adventurer asked whether that meant they simply had to cut off the head of the snake. Another man pointed out that there were hundreds of monsters and questioned how they were supposed to find it. Gaston explained that the commander was usually the most powerful monster in the group. The branch chief confirmed that Gaston was correct about the commander. While keeping the swarm as under control as possible, they had to find it, and they had no time. The adventurers began discussing their strategies for dealing with the monsters. During the commotion, Fatina glanced at Ark and asked where he was going. Ark casually replied that he was going to take out their commander. If what Gaston and the guild had said was true, that would settle things. Gaston's eyes widened in shock. The other adventurers who overheard Ark murmured among themselves, wondering if he was insane. Ark noted that time was running out and told Fatina to find a safe place with the others. Fatina immediately ran after him and shouted for him to wait. Doug gasped as he and the others watched the two of them head toward the battlefield. Meanwhile, as townspeople desperately rushed away from the city gates where the monsters were approaching, Ark ran straight toward the gate. He noted in his thoughts that the eastern gate was right down the main street. Just then, someone called out to him. When Ark turned around, he saw Fatina. He quickly told her to go back, but Fatina refused. Ark explained that this was a swarm of hundreds of monsters and that she could not keep fighting indefinitely like he could. Fatina acknowledged that it might be true, but she could not leave an ally in danger. As a party member, there was no way she could do that. Fatina refused to go back, insisting that even if Ark told her not to, she would still follow him. Ark eventually gave up, deciding there was no reasoning with her, and told her to do whatever she wanted. Fatina confidently affirmed that she would. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild, where everyone had gathered, murmurs filled the hall. Some could not believe that the two were seriously rushing toward the monsters, while another suspected that Ark was merely making an excuse to run away. Anxiety spread through the crowd as they wondered what they should do. The receptionist interrupted and informed everyone that the man in the cloak was the one whose skill appraisal had shown a level limit of 1. The revelation shocked everyone. Some angrily spat that the man had simply run off after all, while another dismissed him as the weakest scum. The branch chief stepped in and reminded them that now was not the time for such talk. Hearing all the slander, Gaston muttered inwardly that they were saying whatever they wanted, but he could not figure out how to explain the truth to them. He should have realized earlier, from Ark's instant death magic, that Ark was the adventurer everyone had been talking about. Gaston stepped forward and asked everyone to listen. Whether they believed it or not, the man named Ark was stronger than anyone present at that moment. Ark was not the type to run away. Just as before, he had simply rushed ahead on his own. Gaston continued by explaining that the skeleton ogre he had reported to the guild had actually been taken down by Ark inwardly. Gaston remarked that Ark was more earnest than anyone else. A man in the crowd scoffed and dismissed the claim as nonsense, while a woman shouted that it was true. Doug asked Gaston what he was talking about, but Gaston ignored him and continued addressing the crowd. All they needed to do was hold back the swarm and buy Ark and Fatina some time. However, the crowd reacted negatively. One person insisted that there was no way they could defeat all of them. Gaston countered that if they worked together and focused on defense, they could at least hold the monsters off. Meanwhile, the receptionist quietly informed the branch chief that Ark was also the one who had brought in the killing bear. Someone in the crowd immediately rejected the claim as impossible and questioned who would believe it. The crowd began protesting loudly. One person demanded to know who would take responsibility if they failed. Another insisted that they should flee west, while someone else declared that anyone who wanted to fight could do it themselves. Hearing all of this, Gaston cursed inwardly and wondered what he could possibly do. Just then, someone arrived and indicated that they also knew about the matter being discussed. Meanwhile, at the eastern gate, the guards were busy preparing for the incoming swarm of monsters. The commander ordered them to gather all available troops and guards if possible and use any nearby materials to build barricades. Non-combatants were instructed to head west because there was not enough spare manpower to escort them. The commander suddenly stopped when he noticed two people running toward the gate. He called out to them, asking what they were doing and urging them to hurry and take shelter. Before he could finish, Ark and Fatina ran straight past him without slowing down. The two slipped through the gate. A guard gasped in shock and asked the commander who those people were before announcing that he was lowering the portcullis. Meanwhile, Ark and Fatina continued rushing forward. After covering some distance, Ark suddenly stopped and signaled Fatina to stop as well. Before engaging the monsters, Ark decided that they should organize their thoughts. Fatina nodded in agreement. Their main target was the monster acting as the commander, but she also wanted to lighten the assault on the town as much as possible. Ark explained that they did not have to defeat every monster and only needed to focus on stopping as many as possible. Thinking to himself, he realized that he likely could not fire his death magic quickly enough, so he would need to rely on regular weapons as well. Ark told Fatina that he knew it was a lot to ask, but she needed to remember the recovery effect from leveling up. Fatina acknowledged that she understood. As they walked together toward the swarm, Ark suddenly called out to her again. Fatina urged him to continue, and Ark quietly thanked her. Hearing that, Fatina smiled. After closing the distance between themselves and the monsters, the two of them lunged forward to attack. Fatina and Ark rushed toward the incoming swarm of monsters. As they closed the distance, the monsters' formation began to scatter. Several were defeated in an instant, but many still remained, quickly surrounding the two of them. Ark swung his blade, cutting down two monsters at once. When an ogre charged toward him, he activated his instant death skill, causing it to collapse on the spot. However, another group of monsters quickly surrounded him again. Ark realized there was no time to rapid-fire the skill and decided to save his death magic for the stronger enemies. Concerned about Fatina, Ark glanced toward her. She was also surrounded by numerous monsters, but her swift and precise movements allowed her to cut them down one after another. Seeing her handle the situation with ease, Ark realized she was doing fine. Fatina turned toward the monster in front of her and swung her sword horizontally, slicing the ogre cleanly in half. She slipped past its falling body and immediately defeated another monster attempting to surround her. Meanwhile, an explosion erupted in front of Ark as two ogres charged at once, knocking smaller monsters into the air as they forced their way through. Ark realized anxiously that he was on his own now. There was no time to doubt himself as the ogres closed in. Ark leapt over one of the ogres, realizing that this was nothing compared to when he had fought the skeleton before. With a loud shout, he lunged toward the ogre's face, grabbed its horn and activated his death skill. The monster collapsed instantly. Without stopping, Ark jumped toward the second massive ogre. Just as it raised its arm to attack, a massive fist struck the ogre's face. The creature staggered backward before turning to face Ark again. Ark activated his dead coffin skill, summoning the giant ogre he had just defeated. He returned the ogre to the remaining one by throwing its corpse toward it. The massive body slammed into the remaining ogre, sending both crashing to the ground. Fatina witnessed the scene and was impressed by what she had seen. Ark panted heavily, wondering how the battle had gone. His thoughts trailed off when he noticed the goblins still standing their ground. His eyes widened. Even after witnessing the two powerful ogres fall, the goblins had not flinched. Ark realized that having a commander truly made a difference. Suddenly, the monsters shifted their focus. Fatina immediately warned Ark, and he realized that their attention had changed from the two of them to the town. They would not be able to cover everything. Then Ark noticed something unexpected. The gate behind them was still open. He could not understand what was happening. A rumbling sound suddenly echoed from the eastern gate, and figures began appearing through the dust. Fatina immediately recognized them as reinforcements, and relief spread through her. As the reinforcements rushed forward, Gaston urged the others to push the monsters back while making it clear that the adventurers would protect their adventurer town. At the same time, the commander ordered the rear guards to halt and instructed the archers and mages to launch their attacks. The command was given to fire at will, and flaming arrows rained from the sky, striking the monsters. Gaston then ordered the men to charge. Everyone immediately scattered and engaged the monsters. A large, muscular man swung his massive sword, defeating several monsters at once. His companions reacted with admiration at the display, recognizing their boss. Another companion noted that such strength was exactly what they would expect from a former B-rank adventurer. The bulky man reminded his companions that dismantlers knew the weak points of these monsters better than anyone and urged everyone to do their best. Roger was the response from the two men. Meanwhile, Ark scanned the battlefield. Gaston called out to him, instructing Ark to leave the rear to them and focus on the commander. Ark acknowledged the order and told Fatina to come with him. She immediately agreed. Near the gate, Doug brought more arrows and potions before turning around to retrieve the next load. Meanwhile, the commander ordered the injured to retreat and receive treatment from the clerics immediately. He warned the troops not to allow the front lines to run out of forces. Long-range suppression was to continue wherever no allies were present, while any monsters that slipped through were to be eliminated with overwhelming numbers. The commander realized that, thanks to the adventurers stepping in, they could focus on commanding from the rear. Even so, they were barely holding the line and could not afford to let their guard down. They needed to defeat the monster commander as soon as possible. Just then, a deep, threatening growl echoed across the battlefield. A massive monster stepped forward, its dark aura spreading through the air. Gaston's eyes widened. The commander's face filled with horror as he recognized the creature as a chimera. The chimera possessed the body of a lion, a goat's head, and the tail of a snake. Its threat level was extremely high because all three parts could wield their abilities simultaneously. Its level exceeded rank A. Ark froze in place. Gaston clenched his teeth, wondering if the creature really was a chimera. He had never heard of one so black before. A man shuddered at the sight of its skeletal tail, while another wondered if it had mutated. The creature looked like darkness itself, like a shadow. Ark realized that it had to be the boss. It was not merely powerful. It was an irregular monster, likely the core of this horde and probably its commander. Ark glanced toward Fatina and saw her trembling, frozen in place. Her voice shook as she identified the monster as the one that had attacked her village. Ark acknowledged that he understood. He then realized that this answered the question of the three cries. The scream from back then had likely come from the snake part. Its skeletal state might have been a sign that the effect of death had failed to reach its core. If he could land his attack on one of its main lion bodies instead, he might be able to defeat it. Suddenly, the chimera lunged toward them. Fatina realized that it was coming their way. Without hesitation, Ark activated his quadruple death burial. The chimera charged forward while everyone shouted warnings for Ark to watch out. Ark remained confident that he was fine. Ark reasoned that if they could just stop this one, the whole situation would die down. They did not have much longer before everyone became exhausted and was wiped out. He would decide things here. As the chimera drew close enough, Ark cast his death skill. However, a barrier appeared and nullified the attack. The chimera seemed to mock him. Ark cursed inwardly as he realized it was Satan's protection. He had rushed in too quickly, attempting to defeat it before fully understanding its abilities. As the chimera closed the distance, Fatina leapt forward and shoved Ark out of the way. The impact sent her flying through the air. Ark immediately checked whether she was alright. One of the men gasped in shock upon realizing that the chimera even possessed magical defenses. Another could hardly believe that it had such an ability. The chimera then turned toward the soldiers. The men froze in terror, and one of them ran as the creature approached. The chimera pursued the fleeing soldier and lashed out with its skeletal tail, striking the fleeing soldiers. Those who witnessed the attack stood stunned. One man realized that the tail could still move like that despite its condition, while a woman compared its movement to a bladed whip. Panic spread among the troops as they realized their attacks were useless. The goat head could block magic, and the creature moved too quickly. Suddenly, Fatina stood up. Ark panted heavily, realizing that unlike in the forest, where he had covered himself when it saw his magic coming, this situation was different. From the corner of his eye, he saw Fatina step forward. Ark called out to her, but Fatina simply declared that it was her turn now. A man urged the attackers to charge all at once if the creature possessed magic defense. However, when the chimera turned its tail toward them, it released a heavy breath from its mouth that struck 3 men and froze them in place. Their weapons clattered to the ground as they stared in shock, desperately trying to force their bodies to move. Gaston clenched his teeth as he realized that it was paralysis combined with heavy breathing. In other words, it was a miasma. The chimera breathed its miasma toward the other men as well, instantly rendering them unable to move. One man gritted his teeth upon realizing that the chimera possessed multiple abilities, while another recognized that neither sword nor magic could reach it. A third man raised his bow and decided to try arrows instead. He released an arrow toward the chimera, but the creature swiftly deflected it with a flick of its tail. The chimera glanced at them with what looked like a smirk, leaving the men staring in disbelief. One realized that the monster was mocking them, while another clenched his teeth in frustration at the uselessness of even arrows against such a powerful creature. Surrounded by enemies, the chimera let out a thunderous roar. Watching the beast, Ark noted that it possessed the physique of a lion, a goat's magic defense, and a snake's miasma breath. Such dangerous abilities made the creature far too threatening. He turned his attention to Fatina, wondering what she planned to do, but the chimera's roar only heightened his alarm. Ark soon realized that the miasma was spreading faster than expected. Even a sword master would not be able to get close. His thoughts stopped when he saw Fatina step forward. With each step she took, a bright light shone around her, and Ark was stunned to see the miasma vanish wherever she walked. He immediately understood the reason. It was Magic Breaker. Fatina believed she could get close to the monster and recognized that this was her fight as well. Besides, she had gained plenty of levels and wanted Ark to trust her. Ark realized that she was right. Teaming up with Fatina was the better choice, and acting without her would have been reckless. He accepted her decision and left the goat head to her. A faint smile appeared on Fatina's lips as she stepped toward the chimera. The monster's sharp eyes immediately locked onto her, but Fatina did not flinch beneath its threatening aura. With every step she took, the miasma disappeared around her. Fatina resolved to use everything she had with the power she had been given. Watching from a distance, Ark wondered whether what he was sensing was bloodlust or perhaps simply her guts. The chimera reacted to her intense aura. At the same time, Gaston wondered whether Fatina could truly fight the monster alone, despite having heard that her ability was incredible. The men watching could not hide their admiration. One was impressed by how awesome she was, while another felt chills simply from watching her. The chimera lunged forward, and Fatina lunged at it as well. As she closed the distance, she ran toward its side, but the chimera quickly turned to face her. In a swift motion, Fatina created distance again. The chimera lunged toward Fatina repeatedly as she moved into its blind spots, but each time, the monster reacted just as quickly. Fatina clicked her tongue, realizing that the battle would never end unless she could outmaneuver it. Watching the intense clash, Gaston recognized how fierce the fight was. Even without the breath attack, he doubted that he could step in. Everyone could only watch the battle unfold, with none of them daring to interfere. Fatina planted her foot firmly on the ground and rushed toward the chimera, which charged at her as well. The chimera leapt into the air while Fatina slipped beneath it. With a swift swing of her sword, she injured the monster's leg. Ark and Gaston both recognized the move as excellent. The chimera stopped and growled angrily while Fatina ran forward, away from it. Gaston stared in confusion as she approached him, unable to understand why she was coming his way. Fatina needed to avoid losing momentum during the counterattack, so she decided to use Gaston's shield. Just in time, she leapt into the air and landed vertically on his shield. Using the force of the impact, she launched herself back toward the chimera. The enraged monster lifted its tail and released a thick cloud of miasma, but Fatina pushed through it. Her breath hitched as she struggled against the poison, yet she forced herself forward. The moment she reached the skeleton tail, she shouted and swung her sword with tremendous force, shattering the tail instantly. Gaston was left stunned as he realized that the combination of Magic Breaker and a silver weapon had worked. Ark felt relieved that the breath attack was now sealed, but the thick dust filling the air quickly made him anxious about Fatina's condition. The chimera roared furiously. As the dust slowly settled, everyone gasped upon seeing Fatina clinging to the chimera's back. The sight left Ark worried by her recklessness, but he also recognized that this was their chance. He immediately activated his quadruple death burial. At the same time, Fatina struck her sword against the chimera's other head, making it roar violently. The beast thrashed wildly, and the force snapped Fatina's sword before throwing her into the air. As she fell, Gaston caught her just in time and praised her for doing well. The chimera continued to roar and thrash until it noticed Ark approaching. It flinched slightly. Fatina saw Ark closing in, and when the chimera opened its massive jaws toward him, alarm seized her. Before the monster could swallow Ark, he activated his death skill. He raised his hand toward the chimera, and the creature rushing toward him was struck instantly. Its life vanished in a moment, and its massive body collapsed to the ground. At the same moment, the swarm of monsters began disappearing one by one. A man realized in shock that the monsters were vanishing. Near the gates, Doug recognized that something must have happened because no one on the battlefield was moving. The commander began to wonder whether the chimera had been defeated. Gaston quietly wondered whether it was finally over. Fatina called out to Ark. When the dust finally cleared, everyone saw the chimera lying motionless while Ark stood firm on the battlefield. Relief shone in Gaston and Fatina's eyes. Without hesitation, Fatina rushed forward and jumped into Ark's arms. After the intense battle, a victory celebration was held. A woman raised her voice and declared a toast to everyone who had saved Boltana, prompting the gathered people to raise their cups and cheer together. The celebration began, and everyone enjoyed themselves freely. It had been a week since the Boltana raid, and damage assessments and restoration plans for the surrounding areas were still underway. People had been scrambling together to deal with the aftermath. Today's gathering was a small celebration hosted by the Adventurers Guild to commemorate the end of the incident. Fatina remarked that it was finally over. Ark had heard that the monsters in the dungeon had quieted down and that the upper floors were now empty. They had also discovered that the phenomenon of monsters spawning from the walls had been caused by that chimera. Once it was defeated, the minions vanished. Fatina found the existence of a monster capable of spawning creatures like that terrifying. Ark agreed, reflecting that if it had only been the two of them. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a loud voice. Gale, who seemed slightly drunk, loudly praised the rookie everyone had looked down on for standing against the skeleton ogre and facing the monster swarm without hesitation. Despite that, the people who had failed to act still called themselves adventurers, which Gale considered disgraceful. A man sighed, already tired of hearing Gale start up again. Another man pointed out that Gale himself had not even fought. Someone else agreed with the criticism. Gale angrily demanded to know what they meant, insisting that he had allowed them to use everything in his store and had therefore contributed. While choking the man by the collar, he continued insisting that he had played his part. The man responded that such contributions were meaningless if they did not survive. Another person stepped in and urged Gale to calm down. Someone behind them muttered that the man had managed to rile Gale up again, though he had contributed as well. The man glanced back and explained that he had family in this town too, and could not simply abandon them. Ark and Fatina silently watched the scene as Gale continued trying to beat up the man while the others restrained him. Later, Ark learned that Gale had rallied the hesitant adventurers by showing them the skull as proof that they could count on Ark. Ark realized that they truly could not have handled everything on their own and that they were deeply indebted to Gale-san. The other person who had rallied the adventurers was Gaston. Just then, Gaston approached and greeted Ark, noting that Ark was still breathing. Ark acknowledged that he owed Gaston his life once again, but Gaston told him to stop saying things like that. Gaston then introduced a man named Hans, who had once been Hans' subordinate. Hans greeted Ark and Fatina politely and explained that he had been leading the defense squad from the rear. He believed they had crossed paths at the gate. Ark understood then that Hans, being Gaston's former subordinate, explained why the group had coordinated so well from front to back. Hans had not expected to meet Gaston-san there, but their encounter had turned out to be fortunate. Ark and Fatina's presence had also been crucial, and Hans considered the way they had defeated the Shadow Chimera nothing short of brilliant. Because the town had united during the fight, people were now cooperating with the mercenary work and reconstruction efforts, allowing things to progress smoothly. As a soldier, Hans wanted to personally thank Ark and Fatina as the ones who had set everything in motion. Ark attributed his involvement to simply happening to be there, but Gaston suddenly smacked him on the back. Even if Ark had not accomplished it alone, Gaston made it clear that it was still an achievement worth being proud of and that Ark should face it head-on. Ark was now a full-fledged adventurer. Fatina agreed enthusiastically. Ark realized that his earlier response had been one of his bad habit. He nodded and admitted that Hans was right. The two men shook hands, and Ark thanked Hans as well for helping them. Just then, a group of drunken adventurers surrounded them. They had finally found the stars of the show and urged Ark not to remain in the corner but to join them. Some wondered whether Ark and Fatina had only just registered and whether they were even old enough to drink. Others called upon the star among stars to tell them the story. And so, the night continued in lively celebration. The next morning, Fatina stared at her new sword in amazement. Gale had called them in early and revealed that the sword was a masterpiece made from the bones of the Shadow Chimera. It had been crafted in collaboration with a guild dismantler specifically as a special reward for them. Ark thought that Gale-san seemed to have overdrunk the previous night while celebrating the sword's completion. The weapon would be perfect for them since they intended to continue exploring the dungeon. As for Ark, instant death magic had now reached level 30. He had spent his saved-up points on range level 2 and success rate level 3, along with the new special skill gained from the Chimera. The skill seemed to cause status effects on opponent. Ark wondered if it came from that breath attack. If it affected an opponent's performance, it would be a win for him. Ark's thoughts abruptly stopped when he saw Fatina swing her new sword and slice a tree cleanly in half with a single strike. Fatina herself trembled in shock before rushing over to Ark, eager to know whether he had seen it. Ark admitted flatly that he was surprised. He then remembered Gale mentioning that the sword possessed some kind of special effect. Since it had been made from such powerful material, it must have retained magical energy. That explained why it was so valuable as a trade item. Fatina smiled brightly as she understood. She would have to thank Gale again. Emmy approached them after hearing a loud noise and figuring they might be there. Fatina greeted her brightly, and Emmy returned the greeting with a cheerful good morning. Ark asked whether Emmy had been looking for them. She confirmed that she had and explained that she had received a request concerning the two of them and had come to escort them as requested. Fatina wondered who could be asking for them. Ark understood that it was likely guild-related and found himself interested. Since their only plan was to investigate the dungeon, they still had time. Emmy smiled and asked them to follow her, and the two quietly accompanied her. As they walked, Emmy suddenly called out to Ark. He urged her to continue, and she explained that it might be too late to say it now, but she wanted to apologize for laughing at the results of his ability. Fatina looked surprised upon hearing this. Ark remembered the day he had received those results and admitted to himself that it really had happened. He reasoned that Emmy had not meant any harm and had simply been shocked. Since the results had not matched her expectations, he could not blame her, and if he had been in her position, he might have laughed as well. Ark assured her that he was no longer bothered by it. Besides, discovering his instant death magic had allowed him to fight and protect the town. Emmy wiped a tear from her eye and expressed her appreciation. Fatina smiled brightly as she watched the two reconcile. Soon afterward, they arrived at the second floor of the Adventurers Guild. Emmy informed them that the people who had summoned them were waiting inside the room. When they entered, they found 3 people waiting there. The woman immediately greeted them and asked Ark whether he was the famous instant death Kuan. Ark repeated the nickname in his thoughts with confusion. Emmy then excused herself and left. After everyone settled onto the couches, the woman thanked them for answering the summons. She introduced herself as Cecilia, an S-rank adventurer and party leader. Ark repeated S-rank in his thoughts, still processing the rank. Cecilia then introduced the woman beside her as Veronica, their cleric, and the man as Leonis, their paladin. Leonis greeted them politely and expressed his pleasure at meeting them. Ark introduced himself as Ark, the mage, and introduced the girl beside him as Fatina, the swordswoman. He added that they had recently been promoted to C-rank. Cecilia returned the greeting and said she would get straight to the point. She wanted Ark and Fatina to help them conquer the Eastern Dungeon. As a team of 5, they intended to reach the lower levels. The proposed payment was 100 gold coins up front and another 200 upon success. Fatina gasped at the amount, stunned that 200 gold coins was enough for a village to survive for 4 years. Ark asked Cecilia to wait a moment and admitted that the situation felt strange. Even with the recent anomaly, the dungeons around there were still considered low difficulty within the country. He could not understand why an S-rank team would rely on him and Fatina, as it simply did not make sense. Inwardly, Ark acknowledged that if the request concerned only him, it might have been acceptable. However, Fatina was with him, and he could not take any unnecessary risk. Leonis silently recognized how sharp Ark's thinking was. Cecilia smirked and acknowledged that his question was fair before beginning her explanation. First, regarding strength, she turned to Veronica. Veronica nodded and revealed that Fatina possessed the Sword Saint skill. Fatina was around level 30 now, but her cap was 100, making her potential unquestionable. Both Ark and Fatina were shocked by the accuracy of her statement. Cecilia explained that Veronica possessed the appraisal skill and had already identified them the moment they entered. Veronica continued by explaining that Ark, the instant death mage, was only level 1, yet his stats were comparable to those of a monster. Even after seeing them for a second time, she still found it difficult to believe how absurdly powerful he was. Ark realized that appraisal was not a skill many people possessed and concluded that hiding their strength was not an option. Cecilia apologized and explained that the mission was important to them as well. She then gave them the second reason. They had already failed a previous attempt to reach the lower levels. Recently, the 3 of them had entered the dungeon, but midway through their expedition, they realized they lacked sufficient power and were forced to retreat. Leonis admitted that it was embarrassing, while Veronica clenched her teeth and regarded it as the biggest blunder of her life. Ark wondered whether there was truly something that powerful waiting below, even if it had nothing to do with the recent anomaly. Cecilia then explained the third reason, which was the most important to her. Adding strength to their party was easy, but they needed someone they could trust. When she had returned from the northern region, she had heard about the town attack, and no matter whom she asked, Ark and Fatina's names continued to come up. Someone who inspired that much respect and trust was someone Cecilia needed to see with her own eyes. Cecilia apologized again and admitted that she had assumed Ark knew that Instant Death Kuan was only a nickname. Ark revealed that he had not known. Fatina remarked that the nickname really gave off an unlucky feeling. Cecilia explained that these were the reasons they had chosen Ark and Fatina and asked them to seriously consider the request. Ark then asked one more thing. Cecilia had referred to the request as a job earlier, so he wanted to know who had commissioned it. Cecilia replied that all she could reveal for now was that it had come from a certain someone. Ark fell silent. Whoever this person was, they had enough influence to mobilize S-rank adventurers, offer an absurd amount of payment, and still keep everything secret. What was being presented as trust sounded more like confidentiality. Ark was interested in exploring the lower levels, but the situation remained suspicious. Leona sighed and pointed out to Cecilia that he understood she was trying, but her explanation was not helping her case. Cecilia flinched at the blunt comment. Veronica added that the situation sounded so shady that she almost laughed. Cecilia hurriedly told them both to stop, insisting that she was not trying to scam them or feed them anything. She was simply trying to act like a proper leader with dignity. Ark sighed and turned to Fatina to ask for her opinion. Fatina had no problem with the request. They seemed like good people, and if anything happened she would be his sword. Ark nodded. He was honestly interested in the lower floors as well. Inwardly, he knew that if he became too cautious they would miss their chance. Although it was risky, it could be worth it. Ark told Cecilia that they had decided to accept the offer. Cecilia reacted with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed with relief at their decision. She then asked Ark to sign a form just in case. After that, the meeting concluded. Ark stood up and informed Cecilia that they would prepare everything in advance and regroup in 2 days. Cecilia agreed, then added one more thing she needed to tell him. The Verdant Labyrinth was the Eastern Dungeon's real name. Afterward, the day of their raid on the Verdant Labyrinth finally arrived. A swarm of hobgoblins rushed toward the party. Stronger and more intelligent than ordinary goblins, the hobgoblins inhabited the dungeon's mid-floors. Ark spotted them first and warned the others. Before the creatures could attack, a large monster suddenly appeared in front of him. Leonis immediately cut it in half, then charged into the surrounding hobgoblins and defeated them with ease. As a max level 80 paladin with the skills Taunt and Unyielding, Leonis proved to be an exceptional tank. Fatina was impressed, while Ark recognized how well Leonis fit the party's formation. Suddenly, the nearby wall crumbled, revealing a 3-meter-tall minotaur. The B-rank monster was a dungeon-dwelling beast with the head of a bull and strength comparable to an ogre. Leonis prepared to face it. Veronica began casting a protection spell as the minotaur swung its axe. Her magic strengthened Leonis, allowing him to block the attack with his shield. Veronica then used appraisal and identified the minotaur's weakness as fire. Cecilia immediately took advantage of the information. As a max level 80 magic swordswoman skilled in all element magic and intermediate swordsmanship, she surrounded her sword with flames and struck the minotaur with flame lance. The monster was defeated instantly. The remaining enemies were the hobgoblins. Cecilia used ice magic to freeze them from below, eliminating them just as quickly. Ark watched the battle with amazement. The 3 members of the S-rank party had used their abilities in perfect coordination, clearing the enemies with almost no effort. Cecilia explained that she was essentially the party's main striker. Leonis handled the front line while Veronica provided support, allowing Cecilia to focus entirely on offense. Veronica's gauntlets also doubled as a wand, further adding to her versatility. Veronica considered enemies up to A rank manageable for their party. Ark realized that the S-rank title was well-deserved. They had been moving through the mid-floors with remarkable ease. Ark wondered whether there was any opponent the 3 of them could not defeat. Cecilia suggested discussing it in the safe area ahead, so the group continued onward. When they reached the safe area, Cecilia pointed out the traces left by previous adventurers and settled down. Leonis leaned against the wall while Ark examined their surroundings. The upper safe area had also contained a water source, but this one resembled a carefully maintained spring. Once again, the dungeon's strange nature left Ark curious. Cecilia then explained what prevented them from reaching the lower layer, the gatekeeper. It was a golem. Golems were inorganic monsters brought to life through magic, commonly formed from earth or stone. Their bodies could also consist of materials found within the dungeon. Their durability varied, but they possessed no sense of pain and continued attacking until they were completely immobilized. Ark found the thought of facing one unsettling. Despite their harmless appearance in picture books, real golems were far more dangerous. Leonis explained that the dungeon's materials were unusually dense, highly resistant to magic, and extremely rare. Since the gatekeeper was only a single monster, Cecilia believed that overwhelming it with enough numbers could bring it down. Leonis agreed that the only option was to break the golem apart. Ark focused on the mention of the rare dungeon material and began to realize what that could mean. Then, someone suddenly gasped in shock. Cecilia was shocked to learn that instant death could affect skeletons. Ark confirmed it, admitting that he had always wondered why the skill worked on creatures that were technically no longer alive. Leonis turned to Veronica for an explanation, knowing that undead creatures were her area of expertise. Veronica explained that holy magic could purify undead by removing the magic possessing their bodies. It was not true exorcism and did not send them to the afterlife. Instead, it simply removed the dungeon mana controlling them. Fatina wondered whether that meant the process had nothing to do with ghosts. Veronica clarified that wraith-type undead were different because they were souls that had become monsters. Physical undead, such as corpses and skeletons, were simply bodies controlled by dungeon mana. Ark realized that this explained why they rarely encountered undead outside corrupted areas. The real problem was the mana itself. Purification could remove it, but it could not stop new mana from accumulating. Veronica then considered another possibility. If instant death completely erased the mana within an undead creature and prevented it from reforming, perhaps the spell treated the stored mana as equivalent to life force. Applying death to that mana might be what caused the undead to disappear permanently. Before Leonis could finish reacting to the idea, Cecilia asked whether the same principle could work on golems. Veronica explained that golems were essentially puppets controlled by invisible mana thread. If the mana supplying those threads could be completely severed, instant death might be able to destroy them as well. Cecilia immediately saw hope in the possibility. Ark also realized that Veronica's theory could explain how his own abilities worked, even though he still understood very little about them. He appreciated Veronica's insight. Veronica proudly accepted the praise, though Cecilia quickly became annoyed by her attitude. The group continued deeper into the dungeon until another swarm of undead appeared. With so many targets gathered together, it was the perfect opportunity to test their theory. Fatina stepped forward and unleashed a single powerful slash. Everyone except Ark stared in shock as the undead were annihilated at once, leaving only one behind. Veronica was stunned by the result. Ark, however, had expected something similar. He used Coffin on the remaining undead and erased it instantly. The group soon realized that Fatina's sword was responsible for the unexpected result. It had been forged from the bones of a shadow chimera and possessed enough power to destroy the undead from a distance. Cecilia acknowledged the sword's strength but also recognized Fatina's ability to draw out its full potential. That level of control was likely the work of a true sword master, something Cecilia herself had yet to achieve with her intermediate swordsmanship. Veronica examined the undead destroyed by Ark's skill. Its mana had been completely erased. Normally, undead creatures could reconstruct their bodies and continue moving, but this one had no mana left to restore itself. The theory was confirmed. Cecilia explained that golems concentrated their mana around their joint. If that mana could be removed, the entire body would collapse. Fatina immediately realized that this made Ark the key to defeating the golem. Leonis and Cecilia would focus on keeping the monster occupied while Ark handled the decisive attack. With their roles established, the group continued deeper into the dungeon. Eventually, they reached the floor they had failed to clear before. Beyond the golem stood the entrance to the lower floors, which resembled a shrine. The creature appeared to be bound to that location, as though its sole purpose was to guard the passage. Ark prepared himself. The outcome depended on him, but he refused to repeat the mistakes of their previous attempt. This time, they could not afford to lose. Leonis checked that Veronica had enough potions and was prepared for the battle. Veronica planned to maintain their protection from the beginning. Cecilia led the group forward, determined to reach the lower floor and complete their objective. Ark briefly wondered what she meant by their objective, but the thought was interrupted by a deafening crash. A figure had already engaged the golem. It was the hero, Alan, accompanied by his companions. Alan charged forward with tremendous force and struck the golem's arm, shattering it in a single blow. Cecilia and the others froze in shock. Ark, however, noticed someone familiar among Alan's companions. Lin. She also recognized him, staring at Ark in surprise. For a moment, neither of them moved. Tension settled between the two parties as silence filled the area. Alan was the first to recognize Cecilia, surprised to see her after so long. Cecilia remembered hearing that Alan had been summoned to the country, but his presence in the dungeon raised questions. She mentioned that they had probably last met during the tournament and acknowledged how impressive it was that he had defeated the golem almost unharmed. Alan treated the feat casually, explaining that it had only been a mid-level floor of a countryside dungeon. His party had also gained several new adventurers, so they had stopped by to help them catch up in levels. Lynn froze when she noticed Ark. Alan then questioned Cecilia's presence, pointing out that an S-rank adventurer had little reason to be in such a place. Cecilia quickly pulled Ark aside and urged him to cooperate. She then explained that their visit was coincidental and that they were helping train a rookie and several guild members. Alan laughed, recognizing that both groups were dealing with similar circumstances. Leonis joined in awkwardly. The situation suddenly changed when Ark sensed something behind them. Fione had appeared without warning and attempted to strike, but Fatina detected her presence and blocked the attack. Fione was visibly surprised and irritated, while Fatina glared at her. Veronica could only stare in shock as Fione quickly retreated. Leonis checked on Veronica, who realized with horror that Fione had genuinely intended to kill them. Ark was equally disturbed that he had failed to notice the ambush. Only Fatina's heightened senses had detected it in time. Cecilia demanded an explanation for Alan's actions. Alan identified Fatina as the sword master rumored to be in town and admitted that he had not expected her to stop Fione. He then praised Cecilia for recruiting someone with such talent. Cecilia reminded him that while a confrontation between parties could happen, attempting to murder another party violated guild rules. She also sensed that something was wrong with Alan's attitude. Alan scoffed before suddenly breaking into loud laughter. The reaction left everyone confused. He stated that both parties already knew why they had come to the dungeon and that the real question was who would stand in the way. Ark was confused by the statement and began to suspect that Alan and Cecilia had entered the verdant labyrinth for the same purpose. Veronica then warned Cecilia that something was wrong with their level cap. Alan's level was 100. Leonis and Cecilia froze at the revelation. Lynn approached Alan, apparently unaware of the situation, but his cold expression immediately silenced her. He dismissed her concerns and ordered her to stop speaking if she did not understand what was happening. Lynn became visibly nervous before collapsing to the floor. Ark wondered whether she truly had no idea what had changed. Dorothea suddenly began casting magic. Flames gathered around her as she prepared an explosive spell. Cecilia immediately ordered everyone to scatter, but Dorothea released the attack before they could fully react. The explosion engulfed the area, filling it with smoke and leaving the surroundings heavily damaged. When the smoke cleared, Alan's party stood ready to fight. Eris, a holy knight whose level had risen to 90, stepped forward. Her skills included taunt, tenacity, and defense modifier. Although she held no personal grudge against them, she intended to show no mercy. Fione, also at level 90, confronted Fatina. Her skills included daggers, agility, and concealment, making her a dangerous opponent at close range. Dorothea, now stronger at level 80, faced Ark. Her abilities included fire magic, water magic, and magic amplification. She mocked his claim of being a mage while continuing to attack. Alan then stepped forward. His level had reached 100, and his skills included swordsmanship, wind magic, and attack modifiers. His overwhelming strength made it clear that he had far surpassed the person Cecilia had once fought years earlier. Before Cecilia could react, a chilling wind struck. Her body was thrown violently against a wall, and she coughed up blood from the impact. Fatina turned toward her in concern, but Fione forced her attention back to the battle and attacked again. Elsewhere, Leona struggled against Eris. Her strength pushed him backward despite his efforts. He was stunned by the power behind her small frame and called for Veronica's support. Veronica had already begun casting a buff, but even with the enhancement, the pair continued to be overwhelmed by Eris. Ark watched the battle with growing concern. Every member of his side was being pushed back. Dorothea noticed how calmly Ark had been observing the battlefield while avoiding her flames. She then changed her attack, casting an ice spell that caused sharp needles to erupt from the ground. Ark moved behind her in an instant. He believed his speed was still superior and prepared to knock her unconscious with a single strike. Before the attack could connect, Dorothea activated her barrier skill, Ice Dress. The barrier stopped the blow and left Ark frustrated as a warning sounded from his hand. Meanwhile, Fatina and Fione continued their fierce exchange. Fione suddenly directed Fatina's attention elsewhere before launching another powerful strike, forcing her backward toward Ark. Ark immediately realized that the movement had been deliberate. The entire sequence had been a trap. Alan raised his sword as lightning gathered around the blade. He activated his sword art and released a devastating shockwave with a single slash. Ark watched the attack approach in alarm. The technique, Sonic Blade, tore through the battlefield towards Cecilia and the others as Fatina desperately called out to Ark. Alan's attack left the battlefield in ruins. Dust covered the area as the silence returned. Fione was furious that Alan's attack had come so close to her. Alan remained unconcerned, while Dorothea complained about the noise. Eris then noticed Ark and Fatina still standing among the destruction. Both were badly wounded, but they were the only ones who remained on their feet. Ark realized that he had survived because of his protection spell and high HP. He quickly checked the others and confirmed that they were still alive, though none of them were capable of continuing the fight. Fatina had used her sword to shield herself from the attack, leaving her in the best condition among them. Ark understood what had happened. Alan's party had deliberately separated them, making each battle appear to be an individual confrontation before using the opening to attack everyone at once. Their strategy had prevented Ark's party from using their greatest advantage, their combined strength. Alan and his companions were clearly experienced in fighting against other people. Against opponents of that level, surviving was nearly impossible unless they were fighting seriously. Ark also realized that using instant death against humans was not an option. His combat abilities alone were insufficient to defeat Alan, leaving his enormous mana pool as his only remaining advantage. Ark ordered Fatina to use Magic Breaker with all her strength. Although she was confused by the request, she immediately agreed. Alan believed their survival had been nothing more than luck and questioned whether they still intended to fight. He saw no reason for them to continue when they were already so badly injured. Lin then tried to convince Ark to stop fighting and escape. Her reaction finally reminded Alan of Ark's identity. He recognized him as the person he had once considered worthless. Fear spread through Lin as she looked into Alan's eyes. Ark, however, remained focused. The situation only reinforced the reason he had been reborn. He intended to defy the people who had once looked down on him. Ark activated Insanity. Dark shadows erupted from the ground as a dense miasma spread throughout the battlefield. Fiona was shocked, while Dorothea struggled to understand what was happening. Alan soon realized that his body had been paralyzed by the effect. Ark continued maintaining the skill despite the enormous strain on his mana. Fatina was stunned by the transformation, but Ark quickly explained that it worked in a similar way to the Chimera's ability. He then urged her to move while she still could. As long as his mana lasted, the miasma would continue weakening their opponents. Fatina was the only one capable of taking advantage of the opening, so Ark relied on her to finish the fight. Lin was confused when she realized that she had also been unaffected by the miasma. Alan suddenly forced himself to move despite the weakening effect. Ark immediately sensed danger and realized that Alan might be preparing another devastating attack. Alan prepared to end the battle. Before he could unleash his technique, Fatina's body moved on instinct. Her swordmaster skill had completely analyzed Alan's ultimate sword technique after witnessing it once. Unlike her previous attempt, this was not an imitation. She had fully understood the technique itself. Fatina swung her sword with overwhelming force and released the same devastating attack. Alan froze in disbelief. He realized that his mistake had been failing to finish the battle with his first strike. Fatina's slash tore through him and the rest of his party, sending them crashing to the ground. She had reproduced Alan's finishing technique, Sonic Blade, after seeing it only once. Ark stared at her in disbelief. Fatina was equally confused by what she had done. She could not explain how she had learned the technique and only knew that she had somehow understood how to use it. Ark remained amazed by her swordmaster skill. Alan and his companions eventually collapsed unconscious, their bodies covered in wounds. Only Lin remained standing. She stared at the defeated group in shock, trembling as she struggled to understand what had happened. Ark turned his attention toward her and instructed Fatina to check on the others. Fatina immediately moved to help them. Once she had left, Ark considered what he should do with Lin. He wondered whether he should say something to her or simply allow her to make her own decision. After a moment, Ark finally called her attention. Lin slowly turned toward him, still trembling. Ark hesitated before deciding to reassure her that she was safe. Before he could finish, Alan suddenly regained consciousness and grabbed Lin. He pulled her close and used her as a hostage, threatening to kill her if Ark made even the slightest move. Alan warned Ark not to move, threatening to kill Lin if he did. Ark clenched his teeth but remained still as ordered. Fatina watched him with concern. Alan then demanded that Ark stay out of the matter. His behavior had completely changed, leaving Ark wondering what had driven him this far. Whatever the reason, Ark knew that saving Lin was more important. Ark considered using the insanity area, but he was unsure whether he had enough mana left or could activate it in time. Instant death was another option, but using it risked hitting Lin as well. Lin, meanwhile, could not understand why Ark was going so far to save her. Cecilia suddenly regained consciousness and stopped Alan. She revealed that Ark, Fatina, and even Lin had been kept uninformed for their own safety. The real reason Alan's party had entered the Verdant Labyrinth was to obtain a powerful artifact known as a key, hidden deeper within the dungeon. Ark asked about the key. Cecilia explained that it was an artifact said to possess tremendous power. Alan's party had been collecting keys under the king's orders and had supposedly been clearing dungeons in the north before meeting with Cecilia's group. Alan's reaction made Cecilia realize something was wrong. Their unusually high levels suddenly made sense. Alan revealed that he already possessed the Aqua Key. Its power had allowed him to break free from the world's fixed level cap and continue growing stronger. To him, the key represented the power to change the world's rules. If he obtained the Verdant Key and the Ember Key as well, Alan believed he would gain power comparable to a god. Ark questioned whether this was truly part of King Krisha's orders. Alan dismissed the king's plans and made it clear that he no longer cared about them. Anyone who stood in his way would be killed. Ark struggled to understand what had happened to Alan. He wondered whether such ambition had always existed within him or whether the power of the keys had gradually stripped away his humanity. Before Ark could think further, Alan suddenly doubled over in pain. His grip on Lin loosened, allowing her to break free. Ark immediately rushed toward her. At that moment, Alan's body began to glow. A key emerged from within him and floated into the air. The dungeon shook violently. Cecilia realized that the tremors were coming from within the labyrinth, but before anyone could react, the ground split apart. Ark reached Lin just in time and grabbed her hand. The floor beneath them collapsed completely. Ark and Lin fell together as the others were swallowed by the widening abyss, and within moments, everyone disappeared into the darkness below. As they struck the ground, Lin realized that Ark had used his mantle to cushion her fall. Ark retrieved it and explained that the floor had collapsed, leaving them stranded in an unfamiliar area. Lin shook her head, tears running down her face. Her concern was not about their surroundings but about why Ark had gone so far to save her. She struggled with the guilt of having once abandoned him, yet he still treated her as someone worth protecting. Ark simply considered her his childhood friend and could not bring himself to watch her die. Lin then noticed his injured arm. The wound was severe, but Ark dismissed it as an injury caused by the fall. Lin quickly realized that he had been hurt while protecting her. Without hesitation, she used healing magic and restored his arm completely. Ark was surprised by the power of the spell, recognizing it as the High Priest's holy magic. Lin became frustrated by his reckless actions, while Ark accepted her criticism without argument. He also realized that Lin had once protected them, and he did not want her to die for their sake either. Even if their relationship could never return to what it had been, he was willing to accept that. For now, their priority was escaping the strange place together. Lin quietly agreed. As they continued moving, Lin asked about the magic that had affected her companions but failed against her. Ark explained that his insanity skill could be countered by magic-breaking abilities. However, Lin possessed the goddess's blessing, which likely gave her a form of holy resistance. Fatina had apparently assumed that the skill would have little effect on her for that reason. Lin was surprised that Ark had considered such a possibility even under those circumstances. After walking for some time, Ark suggested that they search for a direction they could climb toward. Since they had fallen from above, there might be another large opening nearby that could lead them to the others. The deeper they went, the more unusual the surroundings became. Wooden structures covered much of the area, making it completely different from the dungeon floors above. Lin suddenly spotted someone ahead. Eris stood nearby, while Alan sat severely wounded on the ground. His breathing was labored, and his condition was critical. Eris desperately sought Lin's help, knowing that their remaining potions were insufficient. She wanted Lin to heal Alan, but Alan refused to accept assistance. He regarded Ark and the others as enemies and refused to humiliate himself by begging for their help. Eris insisted that he would die if his injuries remained untreated. Lin began to approach, but Alan stopped Eris from continuing. Ark recognized that arguing would accomplish nothing. Instead, he looked around and noticed another enormous hole nearby. He could not tell how far the others had been separated by the collapse, but there was a possibility that they had fallen into the same area. Before he could investigate further, a familiar voice reached them. Fatina had found them. Leonis also checked on Ark, and the group quickly confirmed that everyone was still alive. Once they had gathered, they examined their surroundings and tried to understand where they had ended up. Ark recognized that this was not the same floor they had been on before. Cecilia initially suspected that they had simply fallen to a lower level, but the strange environment made that unlikely. She also pointed out another unusual detail. Since arriving, they had not encountered a single monster. Ark agreed that the silence was unnatural. The area showed no signs of life, yet it did not feel like a safe zone either. Fatina held Lin's hands and was relieved to see that she was unharmed. Lin quietly thanked her. Alan then revealed that they had fallen into the deep layers. Cecilia immediately realized that Alan knew more about the place than he had previously revealed. Alan confirmed that he did, though his condition prevented him from saying much before he began coughing violently. Eris urged him to rest and then explained that something similar had happened in the northern Aqua Labyrinth. Before the anomaly occurred there, she had witnessed a strange light emerge from Alan's body. Ark remembered that the previous incident had not occurred from a mid-layer like this one. Before he could finish his thought, a tremendous noise shook the area. Alan recognized the sound. Massive branches suddenly erupted from the ground. The group froze as an enormous creature slowly emerged from beneath the earth. Its immense weight caused the ground to crack with every step. Alan identified the creature as the Lord of the Deep Layers, the guardian of the verdant abyss.